Chapter 211. This small pot looked like a snowpan that was usually used for cooking. Inside it was half a pot of boiling oil, and it was black kerosene. When Ming Hai brought the pot of boiling kerosene to Hardedef, the scorching heat made his eyes burn. Even the intense pain in his fingers was suppressed for a moment. It could be seen how exaggerated it was. This is. After seeing the pot of boiling kerosene, John's body trembled violently because he already knew what the oil was used for. Although the fully heated kerosene didn't look very eye-catching, its temperature could exceed 300 degrees. It was much hotter than peanut oil and rapeseed oil. Pouring boiling kerosene on one's body was a classic of the polar world, man's bath. Long Do seemed to have felt John's fear from the bottom of his heart. He casually pressed John's head, pushing his handsome protagonist face less than a finger away from the pot. "I'll ask you one last time. What is your purpose in pursuing Yunyang? Who sent you?" Raito's words were still so calm. He didn't even tell John what the consequences would be if he lied again. Although everything was self-evident, under this situation, no one would have thought of the consequences. "No. You won't do this. This isn't human. Doing this kind of thing. You will be punished by God. You will go to hell." As if he was scared silly by the pot of oil in front of him, John trembled violently while he shouted incoherently. To be honest, when she heard this scumbag, who had ruined who knew how many girls and even killed a few of them, say the words "will go to hell," she was shocked. Raito couldn't help but sigh. The thickness of a human's skin could reach such a level. When you do something bad, you just silently pray for God's forgiveness. When others do something bad, you ask God to punish them to hell. Mother****, is God your family's security guard? This is too shameless. So Raito sneered, "If God really exists, then he should beg for my forgiveness. Beg me to forgive him for creating a group of human garbage that does evil in the name of God. Do you understand? You dare to disrespect God. You, hiss." Just as Hardedef was about to reprimand this subhuman, Ming Hai picked up a spoon and shook a spoonful of boiling oil onto Hardedef's face. Hardedef's body was immediately scalded by the oil. "Are you an idiot?" Seeing this foreigner trying to scare his boss with some righteous words, John couldn't help but laugh. Ming Hai couldn't help but mock, "Who do you think you're talking to? We are Extreme Tao. You are talking about God with Extreme Tao? Is there a problem here?" While mocking, Narukai extended a finger and poked John's forehead as if he was poking an elementary school student who made a mistake. Long Do added, "I'll give you 3 seconds to organize your thoughts. If I don't hear a satisfactory answer by the end of the countdown, you'll know how it feels to be thrown into the pot to make tempura." When he heard this, John's eyes suddenly widened. The intense burning pain after the hot kerosene came into contact with his face was endless, and this was only the result of a small spoonful of oil. If his entire head was pressed into the oil, it would be easier to just die. However, John knew that if he didn't speak, this young man would do it without hesitation. Madman, madman, madman. It's over, this Extreme Tao young master is a madman. His brain is definitely not normal. Before John finished cursing in his mind, Raito had already begun to count down coldly. 3, 2, I'll talk. It's the president of the Great Beauty Association who asked me to come. He asked me to seize the family business of the Tsukujiri group. It's the whole plan he arranged. I'm just assisting in the implementation. It seemed that the terrifying atmosphere destroyed his last psychological defense, and John finally couldn't help but burst out everything he knew. The president of the Great Beauty Association? Tsukujiri? The moment he heard this sentence, Raito couldn't help but widen his eyes slightly, and his eyes exuded a strong murderous intent. Raito was too familiar with this name. After all, he had a night of intimate contact with his son Tsukujiri. It was so intimate that he was sent to the hospital, and he was almost killed by his sister Tsukujiri. In fact, Colored Glaze had already suspected that John had some special collusion with the Great Beauty Association. It was just that she didn't expect the whole plan to be led by the Great Beauty Association behind the scenes, and John was just a tool responsible for implementing it. In the original work of Red Photo Album 2, no one survived, The plot did not mention this part. Or in the plot, the Great Beauty Association and Tsukujiri's family didn't mention it at all. The reason why John pursued Yunyang was only on the surface that he coveted her beauty. But the plot of the game was the plot of the game after all. Those plots could only show some parts related to the protagonist. As for the parts that weren't obviously related to the protagonist, there was no mention at all. In the world of the game, the player was just an ordinary high school student. The things that high school students could come into contact with and the scope of life were very small, so it was naturally impossible for them to completely understand the world. From Raito's understanding until now, the depth of the plot that could be known through the game was about 1/10 of the real depth of the world, or even 1%. For example, the most ancient society, Yatsuki, that colored glaze mentioned before didn't have a trace at all in the game. This time, the Great Beauty Association and John's conspiracy were the same. Although John was executed at the end of the plot, his conspiracy with the Great Beauty Association wasn't exposed. Instead, he was imprisoned because of the dirty things he did in private. In other words, even if Raito knew the situation of most of the enemies in the game, he couldn't see through everything in the real world. He still had to collect more information. Just as Raito was thinking, John couldn't help but yell, "I really only know this. Let me go. Or do you want money? I can give you any amount." This time, John was telling the truth. He really didn't know anything else. The marks caused by the kerosene splashed on his face burned with pain. The part of his palm that had 3 fingers broken on his back was even more painful. Now, John didn't want to think about anything else. He just wanted to leave here and see a doctor, no matter the cost. However, after hearing John's words, Raito first raised his eyebrows, then asked kindly, "Oh, if you have money, you should have said so earlier. I forgot that you are a rich young master. There must be a lot of money in your card, right? I have 10 million in my card at any time. This money should be enough to redeem yourself. 10 million? So poor. That's too little, asshole. Are you trying to get rid of a beggar? No, it's really not little. I have 10 million US dollars, USD. What? USD? 10 million US dollars? When he heard that John could transfer such a large amount of money at any time, Raito couldn't help but let out a woe sound. Indeed, although 10 million US dollars didn't sound like a large amount, it was an astronomical number compared to yen. According to the current exchange rate, 1 USD was almost equivalent to 111 yen. 10 million US dollars was 1 billion yen. This was more valuable than Raito and Downier's heads at that time. It was just that although this money was very tempting, it couldn't be taken away casually. After all, after this, the Teddy group would definitely know that the young master was missing. At that time, as long as they investigated the account, they would know that such a large amount of money was missing. This was bound to be a powerful search clue. So if he wanted to take this money, it was definitely impossible to transfer it directly. He had to use some financial means to launder it a few times before it could enter the account. It was impossible for ordinary people to launder this kind of money, but fortunately, Raito had a financial master-level subordinate here. "Escort, go and call Gao Yuan over." "Yes." With Raito's order, the escort immediately ran out of the basement and invited Gao Yuan over not long after. At the same time, Gao Yuan also held 2 laptops in his hands. Obviously, he had already understood the situation here. Under Gao Yuan's gaze, John tremblingly transferred the money through the 2-way operation of the computer and mobile phone to an account in an unknown foreign country. As the prompt on the computer screen changed to transfer successful, this special transfer was completed. "How is it? Is it done? Well, I will transfer this money to different accounts in batches, and then let it go around the world through some operations. In this way, no one will be able to detect the source when it is used again. How long will it take? The first batch can be solved in 3 days at the earliest. At that time, the amount of money will become yen, about 300 million. For this kind of financial operation, Gao Yuan was an expert. It was only a matter of time to launder this money. And the most important thing was that he could do it to the extent that even the professional organization of the Metropolitan Police Department couldn't find out the ins and outs. He could guarantee that the money could be used at will without leaving any trouble. Very good. Suddenly, Raito nodded with satisfaction and walked over to personally help John up from the chair. After the rope on his body was untied, John was so happy that tears almost flowed down. Island country little bastard, you dare to treat me like this. When I go back, I must spend a lot of money to hire someone to burn you to ashes. Although he thought so in his heart, John still smiled at Raito with joy. Can you let me go now? Yeah. Take care. I won't see you out. Catcher. Before he finished speaking, a fist full of force hit John's face directly, and his neck was directly hit by a 180-degree rotation. Chapter 212. Hair. Strange. Why can I see my back? When Raito punched his neck until it rotated 180 degrees, Hardedef didn't realize what happened. In a person's life, if they didn't rely on a mirror, how could they see their own back? This wonderful experience was Raito's last gift to Hardedef, and it was also a gift to send him to the afterlife. Although he got the money, Hardedef definitely couldn't be let go. Raito wasn't a fool. He clearly knew that if he let this guy go, there would be endless trouble. This foreign devil would definitely use all kinds of methods to retaliate. If you cut the grass without removing the roots, you'll see who's the one behind. What's more, from the moment Hardedef planned to pursue Yunyang and seize the Tsukimori group, Raito had already sentenced this idiot to death. After killing Hardedef with one punch, Raito took out a handkerchief and wiped his fist, then stuffed the handkerchief into the idiot's mouth. Narukai, Manta, take this thing out and deal with it. Don't leave any traces. Yes. I promise to complete the task. When they heard Raito's order, the two men familiarly took out a big sack, put Hardedef's body in it, and carried it out of the basement. In terms of dealing with corpses, Kyodo was an expert among experts. If they wanted to, they could make people evaporate into thin air, and in the end, not a single hair could be found. As for how they did it, it was not convenient to elaborate. It's over. When Raito walked out of the basement of the Rulong Group headquarters, Colored Glaze, who had been waiting outside, greeted him. Just as you thought, the Great Beauty Association is behind this. Their purpose is to seize the Tsukimori group. Sure enough, I said there's no such coincidence in the world. Colored Glaze sighed and followed Raito to the bedroom. To be honest, Raito wasn't used to taking a stroll with Colored Glaze in his courtyard in the middle of the night. It was as if the two of them had already started living together. However, just because Raito wasn't used to it didn't mean that Colored Glaze wasn't. After moving in, she found that she actually liked the atmosphere of the Rulong Group headquarters. Every day, there were many Jido walking around, drinking, singing, and playing dice in each room. It felt like a big family, a big and lively family. Although most of the people in this family were gangsters in the eyes of society, Colored Glaze still felt that this group of villains was more honest than the hypocrites of the upper class. Of course, although Colored Glaze didn't say it out loud, she also felt that it was quite pleasant to be with Raito. Under the elegant moonlight, the two walked side by side in the wooden corridor, their light footsteps slowly moving forward. As they walked, Colored Glaze suddenly asked, "Actually, the main reason why you're so insistent on killing Hardedef is that you can't stand him pursuing Yunyang, right?" "You can say that." Raito nodded, not intending to hide his feelings. From an objective point of view, Hardedef was indeed an evil person and deserved to die. But even if he wasn't an evil person, Raito might still make a move on him, just not to the extent of being ruthless. After all, senior sister Yunyang was Longdo's girlfriend. If they wanted to steal his girlfriend, they would be enemies from head to toe. In the world of Jido, there were many ways to deal with the enemy, but there was only one goal, and that was to make the enemy disappear from this world. After hearing Raito's unhesitant answer, Colored Glaze was stunned for a moment, then slowly asked, "Then if someone wants to pursue me?" Before Colored Glaze could finish her sentence, Raito interrupted, "Then he can reserve a place in the crematorium. Even Jesus can't save him, I said so." As he spoke, Raito gently held the hand next to him. The tender little hand that was grasped by his slightly rough hand struggled for a moment, and then she pretended to be reluctant and held back. Why are you so overbearing? Because I want the best things, so I didn't waste my time in this world. Raito's words actually hid another meaning, but Colored Glaze definitely didn't understand it. As they walked, the two came to Raito's room, or Colored Glaze's room door. However, when they came to the door of the room, they found that the light in the room was on. It was normal to turn on the light in a room at night. But the problem was, Colored Glaze and Raito were not inside, so why was the light turned on? Is there someone in the room? Is it dancing costume? She should be helping me tidy up the room or something. No. This smell is. Just when Colored Glaze thought it was dancing costume helping her tidy up the room, her delicate nose suddenly twitched as if she smelled a familiar fragrance. Smell. Sniff. Huh. This isn't it. Voila. Colored Glaze and Raito both smelled this familiar fragrance, and the door in front of the room suddenly opened from the inside. A beautiful woman in a delicate kimono appeared in front of the two. Why are you standing outside? Come in quickly. At this time, Rui Hui waved to Colored Glaze and Raito and said with a smile. Am I seeing things? After seeing the familiar figure, Colored Glaze couldn't help but reach out and pinch Raito's thigh. She found that her fingers were a little painful, then she realized that it wasn't a dream. Rui Hui actually appeared at the Rulong Group headquarters in the middle of the night. And she was waiting for them in Colored Glaze's room. Because this scene was too surreal, the two didn't know how to react in a short time, so they could only walk into the room in a daze. After entering, Raito stood like a primary school student, while Colored Glaze swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked, Mother. Mother, don't tell me you're here, don't worry, I'm not here to take you back. Since you like to live here, then stay. It just so happens that you can enrich your life experience. After Rui Hui entered the room, she sat on Colored Glaze's bed, and this bed belonged to Raito a day ago. Generally speaking, it was normal for a mother to worry about her daughter who ran away from home and come to see if she was doing well. But this seemed so strange when it came to Rui Hui. It was hard to believe that she deliberately came here because of this. So Colored Glaze replied without hesitation, Did something happen? And it's an emergency related to Raito? Oh, it's not easy. You can still think calmly in this situation. It seems that your mind is much clearer. Oh. After being ridiculed by her mother, Colored Glaze's little face slightly blushed. Indeed, if the previous Colored Glaze encountered this kind of mother's sudden inspection situation, she would probably be upset and her mind would be in a mess. But now she was not. She could even immediately infer the reason behind Rui Hui's appearance. It can be said that she was already a qualified military advisor. Seemingly gratified by her daughter's growth, Rui Hui couldn't help but reach out and touch Colored Glaze's little head. Then she turned her head and said to Raito, In fact, this time I came here, in addition to wanting to see how Colored Glaze's living environment is, there is also an important matter to discuss with you. Madam Rui Hui, there's no harm in saying it. Well, Colored Glaze, what's the date in a week, do you still remember? A week later. When suddenly asked by her mother, Colored Glaze thought for a second, then quickly replied, Is it Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony? Yes. The princess is about to turn 20 years old. According to the tradition, she needs to go through the coming-of-age ceremony and make her own crown according to the royal tradition. Hearing this, Raito couldn't help but ridicule. What is a crown? A mere princess can wear a crown. Is this a rebellion? Of course, in fact, the princess wearing a crown has been a tradition for hundreds of years. It is said that it originated from the era of the emperor sandwich at the beginning of the westernization movement. It has nothing to do with rebellion. At that time, the empress was the first empress to wear a western dress, so from then on, there was a tradition of custom-made crowns. When the princesses came of age, they would wear a dress and a crown specially made for them by the royal silver shop Jinza Wako. It is said that the more valued the princess, the higher the cost of making the crown, the more gorgeous the style, and the more pearls and other jewels inlaid on it. And according to the royal rules, Princess Fukudaheim must go to the imperial palace alone on the day of the ceremony to report to her grandparents, the former emperor, that she has become an adult and can take charge of the palace. After that, there will be a grand opening banquet. At that time, the Empress family will also be there to greet the invited guests and celebrate. Lioli naturally knew this ancient tradition very well. However, there was one thing she didn't understand. What did this have to do with the dragon battle? After asking this question, Rui Hui first smiled faintly, then smiled and said, "Good question. According to my sources, the guests invited to Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony are a bit special." Colored Glaze heard this and asked in confusion, "Special guests? Aren't they the people of Yatsuki?" According to common sense, as the core organization that ruled this country, Yatsuki would naturally attend such a large-scale royal event. As the Dark Crow, Rui Hui would definitely go. However, Rui Hui glanced at Raito and smiled. The people of Yatsuki will definitely go, but the problem is that in the list of people invited, there are the leaders of the three extreme organizations Rulone Group, Big Dipper Alliance, and Black Snake Alliance. Hearing Rui Hui's words, Raito and Colored Glaze couldn't help but look at each other and see the surprise in each other's eyes. Chapter 213. The leader of the Rulone Group, Raito Kiri. The leader of the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang. The leader of the Black Snake Alliance, Tessa. In today's Tokyo underground world, these three are famous big shots. After all, not long ago, the Rulone Group, the Big Dipper Alliance, and the Black Snake Alliance announced the formation of a new alliance called the Black Hand Alliance. Before the alliance was formed, they even killed the leaders of the other two Extreme D, the White Tiger Gang and the Psychedelic Soburo. They swallowed the territories and resources of those two groups, and now they were in the limelight. But even so, Extreme D was still Extreme D. No matter how famous he was still not a decent person. He should not have been invited to such a grand event held by the imperial family. So Raito was confused. He scratched his head and asked, "Is there something wrong with their heads? Why did they invite us Extreme D bosses? To cause trouble?" From Raito's point of view, only those who wanted to cause trouble would invite Extreme D to a grand event. Otherwise, there was no reason. But Colored Glaze shook her head. Exactly the opposite. "I feel that this invitation is full of evil intentions. It should be the decision of that woman, Minato Ya. There were not many people who could make the decision for an invitation of this level. As for Raito, Kai Yang, and Tessa, only Empress Wuda would be involved. After all, not long ago, the three of them had formed the Black Hand Alliance and killed Empress Wuda's Hero Alliance while it was still in its infancy. They had also eliminated two of her capable subordinates and two whole forces. According to Colored Glaze's statistics, Minato Ya's direct and indirect losses were at least tens of billions of yen. It could be said that it was a feud on the level of killing her father. With this level of hatred, the Empress would naturally not laugh it off. She would find all kinds of opportunities to take revenge. Therefore, from Colored Glaze's point of view, this sudden invitation was probably Xiao He and Tian Ya's carefully planned revenge. But the problem was, what could they do by inviting three leaders of hostile organizations to the royal princess's coming-of-age ceremony? Demonstrate? Or, no, the main problem was that Raito and the others couldn't possibly go there, right? Since they already knew that the royal family was behind the Renshia alliance, how could the three leaders of the Black Hand Alliance go to the royal family's headquarters? Not to mention the cautious Kai Yang and Tessa, even the daring Long Do wouldn't dare to participate in this kind of banquet that was obviously a trap. Unless the other side used some kind of threat to force them to attend the princess's coming-of-age ceremony. In fact, Rui Hui and Colored Glaze had thought of this as well. However, they didn't know what Xiao and Tian Ya were going to use to threaten Raito. But there was nothing to be anxious about. They would just have to deal with whatever came their way. No matter how anxious they were, it wouldn't help at this moment. After discussing the general situation, Rui Hui stood up from the bed and prepared to leave. But before leaving, she deliberately looked at Raito and said with a smile, "I don't oppose Colored Glaze temporarily staying here, but there are some things that can't be done, understand? This." Of course. After being reminded by Rui Hui, Raito's expression was somewhat awkward, but he still seriously promised. Obviously, The thing that Rui Hui said couldn't be done was the last C in the ABC of love, which was sleeping together. A man and a woman living under the same roof, and both of them were very young. They were at the age where they were hot-blooded and had a strong curiosity about the opposite sex. In Rui Hui's view, this situation was still a bit dangerous because colored glaze still couldn't lose her virginity. It was her last life-saving charm. Rui Hui was very clear about what Raito wanted to do, and she would try her best to help, but the Yatsuki was too powerful. Unless they had the strength to overthrow the country, it was difficult to compete with them. Therefore, the best solution in Rui Hui's mind was to let colored glaze go to the Tenzai shrine for a period of time as the fasting king. When she came out, she would reunite with Raito. This way, there wouldn't be any problems. Although he had given up 20 years of his youth, at the very least, he would be able to preserve his life and not lose it. In order to achieve this, the bottom line was that Lioli had to be a fair and flawless young girl. After all, before becoming the fasting king, the successor had to go through a thorough body examination. Whether she had been intimate with a man or not would be known. In so many years of history, there had been Kamiyoshi girls who had been in trouble. According to what Rui Hui knew, several ancestors who were discovered to be virgins before entering the heavenly abode divine palace were all cruelly treated in the end. They were directly captured and burned to ashes. As colored glaze's mother, Rui Hui naturally didn't want her to be treated so cruelly. Therefore, it was necessary to protect colored glaze's bottom line as the fasting king. Therefore, she specially came to warn Raito that kissing and hugging was fine, but he mustn't push colored glaze down. Otherwise, there would be no turning back. Of course, colored glaze snorted at this attitude. When sending Rui Hui off quietly, colored glaze didn't say a word. Her brows were slightly furrowed, obviously in a bad mood. What's wrong? Weren't you happy just now? Why does your face look so bad now? On the way back to the room, Raito looked at colored glaze's unhappy face and couldn't help but laugh. Chimpage. Aren't you very smart? Guess what I'm thinking? Colored glaze snorted coldly, and at the same time, she couldn't help but reach out and rub the corner of her skirt. You're bothered by what Mrs. Rui Hui said just now, right? After all, it was normal for a teenage girl like colored glaze to be unhappy when she was mentioned in front of her mother. At least, Raito thought so. But in fact, the reason why colored glaze was unhappy was because of this, but it wasn't the whole reason. Mom said that for my own good. I don't dislike her advice. She then smiled bitterly. The reason why I'm unhappy is that I always feel like my body isn't mine. I don't even have the right to decide when I want to be with someone. Colored glaze was naturally very clear about Rui Hui's previous reminder. As long as she didn't have a relationship with Raito, she could always go back to being a fast king. But this feeling made colored glaze feel very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. She always felt that her purity had become her last life-saving charm. She would rather not have this life-saving charm. Chapter 214. At this time, standing on the roof of the guest room, and exuding a murderous aura, was a very short man. He wore an iron mask that covered his entire face, and his limbs were much shorter than normal people. It was obvious that he suffered from some natural disease. But even so, this man didn't give off the feeling of being weak at all. Instead, he had the aura of a 2-meter-tall giant. It was hard to imagine that there would be a man with such a strong aura in the world. It was also hard to imagine that the gaze from behind the iron mask would be so vicious. It was obvious that this man didn't come to Raito's roof in the middle of the night on a whim, but he came prepared. Raito knew this man, and this man also knew Raito. After all, in their last encounter, he left an unforgettable memory for this man. At that time, Raito exploded with his strongest attack and directly hit this man's face. Even the current Long Do could easily recall the crisp feeling of his bones exploding with a single punch. For this man, it was an unforgettable scene for him. Long time no see, Saitu. After slightly raising his eyebrows, Raito said the man's name. Demon Child, Saitu, a top martial arts master, and also the headquarter teacher of the Saitu Guild. In other words, Saitu was once the headquarter teacher of the Saitu Guild. Because after experiencing the Downia kidnapping incident, he was forced to enter the Dao and walk the Jianghu. After all, he colluded with the former Saichu Guild elder House Fujian Mori, who committed suicide for fear of punishment, and the latter colluded with Tenmu Iheim and tried to murder the current president, Wu Hong, so he must be a member of the traitors. Apart from this, Enter the Dojo had also provoked Rui, the head of the Kanzaki family, in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel. In fact, Enter the Dojo had even directly attacked Rui. It would be strange if Rui could avoid him. As time went by, Wu Hong regained consciousness and began to investigate the mole in his family. Naturally, it was impossible for the person who had entered the Dao to remain unscathed. He was one of the main targets of the investigation. According to Raito's knowledge, after Saichu entered the Dao, he should have directly killed several students and police officers who went to the hospital to ask him to assist in the investigation. Then, he disappeared in the alleys of Tokyo, and there was no trace of him. From a certain point of view, Saichu's life was already over. What awaited him next was an endless pursuit. Logically speaking, Saichu Endo was a martial arts maniac after all. He wasn't very good at escaping, so the Saichu Guild Hall should be able to find him easily. As long as he could find this guy, even if he was a rare martial arts master, he would die without a doubt. After all, even though entering the Dao was strong, there were still many powerful martial artists in the Saichu Guild Hall. With the help of 3 to 5 top experts and some modern weapons, it was not very difficult to kill this demon child. But in fact, until now, no one had seen the trace of Saichu Endo, not even a strand of hair could be found. From this point of view, Wu Hong inferred that he might have smuggled out of the country. Only in this way could he disappear so completely. However, judging from the figure now, the possibility of Saichu Endo being smuggled out of the country had been completely ruled out. He had actually been hiding in Tokyo, but perhaps he was living under the protection of someone. However, at this time, Saichu Endo came to Raito in the middle of the night. Naturally, it was not to tell him that he was still alive. Boom! The next second, accompanied by a strong gust of wind, this seemingly small man suddenly made his move. The moment he took a step forward, the bricks and tiles on the roof of the room immediately cracked on the spot. Crackling sounds could be heard from the explosion. At the same time, Saichu Endo's entire appearance changed. His body, which originally looked like a dwarf, seemed to be inflated, and the black night clothes on his body were torn by his muscles. Explosive power also gushed out of his body. Saichu Endo had spent his life learning martial arts, practicing countless martial arts, and a series of hard martial arts with tantric qigong as the core. He was quite accomplished in the study of qi. Therefore, the moment he made his move, Raito could only feel a terrifying sense of oppression, a sense of oppression like a vast mountain. Furthermore, the speed at which he entered the Dao was extremely fast. He merely arched his body and shot toward Long Do like an arrow that had just left the bow. At the same time, his left and right fists punched up and down, as if one punch could break the sky and the other could crack the earth. They went straight for Raito's head and lower abdomen. 2 punches were thrown at the same time. As long as one of them was hit, it would be a tragic end. So fast. But, he could barely see it. Compared to the time when he fought Saichu Endo in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, the current Raito was much stronger, especially in terms of actual combat experience. So he also pulled his bow up and down. His left elbow blasted up and his right knee pushed down, blocking the 2 fatal attacks at the same time. Bang! When the fists, elbows, and knees of the 2 sides collided, it made a terrifying explosion. According to the current situation, Saichu Endo and Raito's physical ability were on par. If it was just a competition of strength, it would be difficult to determine the winner. However, if Saichu Endo was the type of person who relied on strength to survive, he was not worthy of the title of martial Dao master. Saichu Endo let out a cold snort, and a strange force burst out from 0 distance. The second time, it blasted toward Raito's elbows and knees from the 2 fists that were blocked. What? At this moment, Raito only felt numbness in his elbows and knees, and his body immediately lost balance. Stinking brat. Martial arts is not as simple as you think. Just at the moment when Raito lost his balance, a palm the size of a cattail leaf fan had already gently pressed on his chest. It was not a very strong punch, but it seemed to be gently pressing on his chest. It did not look like an attack at all. However, just as the large hand that had entered the Dao pressed on Long Do's chest, a powerful hidden force that was even stronger than the impact of a hammer was transmitted into his body. This. When his body was sent flying backward by this force, Raito could almost hear the bones in his chest screaming, and he could almost imagine the scene of his internal organs being squeezed and deformed by the huge impact. The huge pressure squeezed Raito's internal organs, making him almost breathless. Even though he had retreated 5 or 6 steps before stabilizing himself on the edge of the roof, the palm strike had caused him to break out in a cold sweat and gasp for breath. He felt as if a storm was raging in his chest. So strong. Is this the true strength of the demon child Saitu? That seemingly light slap had dealt unprecedented damage to Fighting Dragon. If it weren't for the fact that his body was tough enough and he had 2 defensive skills protecting him, he wouldn't have survived. Just a light slap would have been enough to kill him on the spot. What kind of terrifying lethality was that? Of course, in fact, Saitu already had this level of strength when he entered the Dao. He was much stronger than Raito. Although the other half of his face was smashed by Raito in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, and he changed from a half-iron mask to a full iron mask, it was not Raito's credit. If it was not for Cat House's rabbit ball throwing out long needles, Raito would not have been able to punch his face. He would have been killed by the demon child in the next second. What a guy! Was that the legendary Qigong? After barely suppressing the strong shock in his chest, Raito took a deep breath and looked at Saitu, who was standing not far away. If it was one-on-one, Raito would not be able to beat this guy. But even so, he was not afraid at all. After all, it was just a matter of 1,000,000. He could just ask a group of people to gang up on him. "Mph, you don't even know this." Saitu snorted in disdain and then sneered. In ancient times, this was called qi or internal force. As long as you master qi, you can actively make your muscles vibrate to generate all kinds of force. Only this can be called martial arts. What you are doing is nothing more than child's play. Oh, there are so many things to pay attention to. I have learned something. Although they were enemies, after listening to Saitu's explanation, Raito couldn't help but nod. This little brat. He really didn't know anything. Seeing Long Do's wide-eyed and enlightened expression, the Dao entrant really felt like he had nowhere to vent his anger. After all, the cultivation of qi was a necessary step in martial arts cultivation. Raito didn't know anything, which meant that he had not even started. However, it was this bastard who had not even entered the gate of martial arts and relied only on his tyrannical physical fitness and a little ancient 8-extremities fist to conquer the world. Yet, he had smashed the other half of the face of someone who had entered the gate of martial arts into pieces. This was truly absurd. Saitu thought about how half of his face was smashed by Raito's collapsing fist. Even his bones were twisted beyond recognition. Saitu's killing intent erupted again. But he couldn't kill him. Saitu didn't come here to kill Raito, but to convey his master's invitation, not to kill him. In the worst stage of Saitu's life, when he was about to be captured by the elites of Saitu Guild and Kamiyoshi clan, it was his master who saved him, so he should repay him. Little brat, catch. Saitu took out an envelope from his arms, and then with a shake of his wrist, the soft envelope spun at high speed like a piece of iron and flew toward him. To be able to throw a soft envelope like a shuriken, this is obviously the effect of qi, which is not something that can be done by ordinary strength. It hurts. When Raito received the envelope, his hand was faintly painful, but when he immediately opened the envelope, his brows slightly wrinkled. "In a week, please come to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, or you will regret it for the rest of your life." There was only one sentence written on the short piece of paper, but the malice contained in it was obvious. Obviously, Saitu didn't come here voluntarily. He was just a messenger who sent this malicious invitation letter to Raito. Chapter 215. So that's how it is. When Raito saw the signature on the envelope, he raised his head again and looked at Saitu Raito, who was glaring at him not far away. He seemed to understand how this guy hid until now. Since the Downier kidnapping incident, Saichu Raito was wanted and hunted by many forces. With his rough personality, it was difficult for him to hide in Yoto. But until now, the various forces couldn't find his whereabouts. This either meant that the guy had escaped, or that a powerful force was protecting him. From the looks of it, the force that took the devil child under its command was the Great Beauty Association and the Japanese royal family that Kawata belonged to. This is troublesome. This time, even this guy can be recruited. From an objective point of view, Saichu Raito could be said to be a rare martial Dao master in the world. His combat power could even be compared to a cat's house. What's more, this person was murderous and violent. Coupled with his extraordinary level of martial Dao, he was like a fully armed mad dog that could kill countless people at any time. Such a powerful mad dog was tamed by Kabato Masa, and he became the subordinate of the queen. It was really difficult to deal with. Kabato Masa already had a lot of forces in the light and in the dark. With the addition of Saichu Raito, it was like adding wings to a tiger. It would definitely bring a lot of trouble to Raito. After throwing the letter in his hand, Saichu Raito said sternly, "Raito Kiri, keep your life for the time being. After you attend the Little Master's ceremony in a week, I will take your life. Wash your neck and wait." Whoosh. The next moment, Saichu Raito's figure immediately jumped out of the roof of the second floor like a bolt of lightning and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the eyes of the huge Rulon Group headquarters, this martial Dao master could come and go as he pleased. No one could stop him at all. A week later, what a forceful way to invite him. Watching the figure of the martial Dao master disappear, Raito could not help but sigh slightly. Originally, he and Lioli had agreed not to attend the coming-of-age ceremony. After all, they were not familiar with Princess Fukudaji, and she looked as ugly as if she drank something strange when she grew up. Who would want to see a mutated woman in her 20s wearing a crown and swaggering around? However, from the letter that the Empress had specially sent over, it seemed that she was determined to make Raito attend. She was even willing to let Saichu enter the Dao to threaten him. "Please come, or you will regret it for the rest of your life." This sentence sounded domineering, but in Raito's ears, it made him very angry. Good fellow, he actually threatened me to such an extent. Did he really think that I was a pushover and wouldn't dare to go? After looking at the invitation letter in his hand again, Raito casually squeezed it. With a fierce rub, the originally thick paper turned into little bits and scattered on the ground. Not good, not good, not good at all. Originally, Ryudo didn't want to go to Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony, but after what Kawata and Saichu did, he really wanted to go. Although he didn't know what they were going to do at the coming-of-age ceremony, Raito suddenly wanted to teach them a lesson. "Didn't you invite me over? Then I'll go, but if the place is smashed, it's your own fault." Thinking of this, Raito couldn't help but take a deep breath, and the expression on his face became very serious. Immediately afterward, he immediately went downstairs to change his clothes, woke up Narukai who was dozing off outside, then left the Rulon Group headquarters by car and went to another street, Jinza-Mokom. After so many things happened, Raito definitely couldn't sleep tonight anyway. Since he couldn't sleep, he simply went to find an old acquaintance and asked the old acquaintance about the problem he was very concerned about. That is, the opening and use of ki. The battle just now, although it was very short. But it could be said that it was the most dangerous battle Raito had so far. In terms of physical fitness, Raito's physical fitness was equal to that of access to Dao, and Raito's physical fitness was even stronger. But when the two of them fought, it quickly became a one-sided situation. The fundamental reason was that access to Dao could control ki. In ancient times, this was indeed called internal strength or ki. As long as you master ki, you can actively make your muscles tremble to generate various forces. Only this can be called martial arts. You're nothing more than a child playing house. When Raito was defeated, Access to Dao once said in a disdainful tone. His original intention, of course, was to ridicule Raito, but he probably didn't expect that it would suddenly arouse Raito's interest. In martial arts, there was a special technique called one-inch force, which could make a powerful blow in a very short distance. Although stored force was mysterious, it was, in essence, just a special technique of exerting force, not a cultivation method. But by mastering ki, making every muscle in the body tremble to generate various forces, this was no longer an ordinary force technique, it was really similar to the internal strength in martial arts dramas. After mastering it, the muscles in the body can begin to contract, twist, pull, and other movements from any angle, thus forming various forces. In other words, first master ki, then use ki to generate force. This was the mastery and use of ki. If the two sides were fighting normally, by controlling ki to make the muscles tremble to strengthen obvious force, it could greatly increase the power of the attack. If the two sides were fighting at a very close distance, they could directly use hidden force to deliver a fatal blow without distance, acceleration, or preparation. It was terrifying. If the enemy was preparing to attack, they could generate dan force from the body. Even if the abdomen or the head were weak, they could still be used to break the enemy's arm. In simple terms, this was the reason Raito was defeated. He didn't know how to use ki, so he couldn't activate obvious force, hidden force, and dan force. An enemy who couldn't control ki like this, in the eyes of access to Tao, was stupid, or even not even worthy to be his opponent. Of course, until now, Raito didn't have any concept of ki, but fortunately, he knew that a person must have some understanding in this area. Not long after, in the Neon Ginza nightclub La Jump Bar, Raito found Furumaki Sataro sitting in the corner drinking cheap wine, and told him his doubts. So that's how it is, burp. You want to ask me about ki? Then you've found the right person. At this time, Furumaki had obviously drunk a lot, but when he heard his proud disciple's question about ki, he still answered in high spirits. As the master of Furumaki-style martial arts, although Furumaki Sataro looked like an ordinary old man, he was still an ancient martial artist who had studied martial arts for decades. Naturally, he knew what ki was. According to old master Jiyu Mu, aura wasn't some kind of magic, nor was it some kind of mystical ability. Instead, it was something that existed in every living being. In the mouth of modern scientists, they call ki the human microelectromagnetic field. In the mouth of the ancient people, ki was called internal force or internal force. But in essence, it was a way to completely unleash 100% of the body's potential. Speaking of this, Furumaki glanced at Raito's muscular body that was completely different from when they first met. Even from the perspective of a martial artist, Raito's current physical fitness was already quite strong. After all, LV4 physique brought an all-around increase that ordinary people couldn't achieve in their lifetime. But even so, Raito only had a very strong physique, and he didn't unleash the potential of this physique to the extreme. If LV4 physique had 100 points of combat power, then Raito could only unleash about 60 points at most, and the other 40 points were hidden in the use of ki. The human body was originally an inexhaustible treasure house, and the hidden treasures were as vast as the Milky Way. After some special training, humans could grasp the power of ki in their hands and unleash all the potential of the body. This was also the realm that the group of top martial artists in history could achieve. From the moment a martial artist can grasp ki, the proficient realms of mastery are obvious strength, inward strength, dan strength, and will strength. But I think these realms may be a bit far from you, so I haven't mentioned it. Speaking of this, the old man couldn't help but look at Raito. It seemed that he felt that it was still a bit too early for him to cultivate ki. After all, the complexity of it was difficult to describe in words. According to Furumaki Sataro's personal experience, it was already very difficult to master the most basic obvious strength. Generally speaking, it was impossible to do without 10 or 20 years of hard work. And the inward strength and dan strength, in addition to decades of hard work, it also required a considerable amount of talent. Otherwise, it was impossible to comprehend it in one's lifetime. As for the final willpower, it was basically a legendary level. It was said that a martial artist who had cultivated to this level would have a flawless temperament like a bright pearl. They would be able to predict danger and avoid calamities. They would be able to move at will and walk leisurely in a rain of bullets. Anyway, no one had seen it before, so they could brag as much as they wanted. But except for the will strength at the end, the bright strength, dark strength, and dan strength were indeed real. Furumaki Sataro could testify to this, because at his peak, He was a martial artist who practiced Dan's strength. Suddenly, Raito smiled helplessly and said, "I can't help it. Who told me to fight with Saito Irido in the near future? If I don't know how to use ki, it will be difficult for me to be his opponent." Bang! Originally, Raito just casually mentioned this name, but when he heard the words Saito Irido, Furumaki Sitaro couldn't help but clench his fist and crush the thick beer bottle in his hand with his bare hands. Chapter 216. Accompanied by a crisp shattering sound, the fragments of the beer bottle mixed with the aroma of malt scattered on the ground, and even slightly cut Furumaki Sitaro's palm. But he didn't care about it, but his face flashed with a dignified expression and anger from the bottom of his heart. At the same time, the old man who usually gave others the impression of a wanton and disco lover had his face darkened, revealing a solemn expression that was comparable to the title of Grandmaster of ancient Mudra school. This is. Does the old man have a grudge against the path of initiation? Since knowing Furumaki Sitaro, this was the first time Raito saw the old man show such an expression. Obviously, the name Path of Initiation sounded very special in his ears. And there was another thing that surprised Raito. It was the strength of the old man's hand that crushed the beer bottle. Now Furumaki's physical ability was very poor, and his physique was only at the level of LV2. It was hard to imagine that his hand strength could crush a thick beer bottle. This was not a syrup used for acting, but a real beer bottle. It would be strange if this level of strength could crush it directly. Could it be that what happened just now was the actual use of chi? Through muscle trembling, it could induce a stronger force? Just when Raito was surprised by the old man's chi, the old man slowly raised his head and said to Raito in a deep voice, "You want to go against Saito? That demon child?" That's what happened. Hearing this, the old man sighed deeply, then shook his head and said, "Forget it, you are not his opponent. Even I am not his opponent." After hearing this sentence, Raito understood that the old man had fought with Path of Initiation. Furthermore, it was obvious that this master of the ancient Mu school had been defeated by someone who had stepped into the Tao. In fact, he had even been beaten up quite badly. After that, the old man told Raito about his past. That was almost 10 years ago. At that time, although the old man loved to dance, he still managed his own Furumaki Ryu dojo well and passed down his skills to the next generation. But on that day, that demon child appeared. He came to provoke me, and I fought with him. In the end, I almost died on the spot. As Furumaki Sitaro spoke, he reached out and lifted the corner of his shirt, revealing the huge handprint on his abdomen. The deep purple handprint was left on the old man's body like a special tattoo. Even after 10 years, it was still as clear as new. It was clear how ruthless Saito's palm was. The most important thing was that the Tao initiation was at the very center of the human body. It was located in the middle of the golden section line of the human body, which was the so-called Dantian. After cultivating qi to a high level, one could use the Dantian to shake the body from the inside out and use the so-called Dan force. This was the realm that the old man had reached. But the Tao initiation directly destroyed almost all the muscles, meridians, and acupoints near the old man's Dantian, causing the Dan force that he had painstakingly cultivated for many years to vanish, and his strength plummeted. So that was it. It was that bastard's doing. Raito had always felt that the old man seemed to be injured. Now that he heard it, he knew that it was a gift left by Saito. Suddenly, Raito could not help but clench his fist, and said in a tone that contained fire, "Old man, I will avenge you." Avenge? What avenge? The strength of the Tao initiation has already reached the peak of Dan force. You haven't even released your qi. Fighting with him is not revenge, it's suicide. Do you understand? Then teach me how to release my qi. As long as I learn, I have confidence that I can kill him. What nonsense. The old man heard this and couldn't help but blow his beard. He said disdainfully, "Even if I help you release your qi now, it will take at least 10 years to cultivate to the point where you can use obvious force. How can it be useful in the near future? Do you think you are a god? Let me try. Maybe I really am an immortal." Raito heard this and smiled slightly. There was a strange, unfathomable confidence in his tone. Of course, Raito was not a god, but his Krypton gold system was comparable to a god. If he remembered correctly, there were no skills related to chi in the shop, but it was most likely because he did not release his chi, and the system determined that there was no such thing. Just like when Raito did not learn the skill Furumaki-style martial arts at the beginning, if he did not have the corresponding skill, then the system would not open the purchase category of the skill. But if he really released his chi, even if it was just a little bit, he could quickly buy the skill book to quickly let this ability reach the point where it could be used in actual combat. Soaring to the sky. But this kind of thing, the old man Furumaki naturally did not know. He only thought that Raito did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. But even so, the old man still could not persuade this stinky hooligan who was more clingy than candy, and could only help him release his chi. Not long after, the two appeared in the back alley of the La Jump Bar nightclub. Compared to the last time when Raito chased the old man to the back alley, the group of junkies who usually gathered here had already disappeared. That was probably because the psychedelic Saburo group had been wiped out. Moreover, under the management of the Black Hand Alliance, the behavior of taking drugs in the middle of the night had decreased a lot. After all, Raito set a rule that if he saw a junkie, he would directly cut off their fingers with a knife and see how many fingers were left for them to suck. After arriving at a single room in the corner of the remote alley, the old man warned again, "I can help you release your chi. After you experience it, you should understand the difference in strength between you and those who have entered the Tao. Don't think about revenge anymore, understand? Okay, I swear, if I don't train my strength to negative jing, I will definitely not take revenge, okay? That's more like it." After hearing Raito's oath, the old man could not help but sigh in relief. After all, negative jing required at least 20 years of training to be produced. This Raito was still far away. Maybe by that time he had entered the Tao, he would have already died of old age. So he waved his hand and said, "Take off your clothes, get ready to start." Take off my clothes? Here. Long Do looked around at the small, dark room and couldn't help but twitch his mouth. This small room should be where the old man usually stayed. It was not that he did not have the money to rent a better room, but it was closer to the nightclub, so it would be more convenient for him to go to the disco. But in the middle of the night, to let Raito take off his clothes here, it was more or less, "Just take off your clothes, I need to perform some acupuncture on your body to stimulate the acupuncture points and let the chi in your body start to become active. This way, you will be able to quickly feel the power." As he spoke, the old man took out a row of acupuncture needles from somewhere and walked over with the needles held up like Granny Rome. "Phew. You should have said so earlier, it's just acupuncture." After understanding the old man's meaning, Raito also took off his clothes and looked at the needles piercing into the acupuncture points on his body. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When the needles pierced into the acupuncture points, it felt soft and numb. It was not painful, but even a little comfortable. From the way the old man inserted the needles, he probably learned acupuncture from an ancient country. Coincidentally, the world's top expert, Maoya, also knew how to use needles. Acupuncture techniques were closely related to the acupuncture points, and the acupuncture points were closely related to qi. Looking at it this way, the reason why Rabbit Ball was so strong should be related to his good use of needles and his deep understanding of the acupuncture points in the human body. After all, he should be able to stimulate any acupuncture point in the body at will, thus creating a strong qi in the body. However, after Raito's acupuncture points were densely packed with needles, the old man Furumaki's next step shocked him. After the acupuncture points were fixed, the old man started to clip small copper wires onto the hooks at the end of the long needles. The other end of the copper wires was connected to something like a generator. It felt like he was planning to give Raito a pleasant electric shock therapy. That. Teacher Furumaki? To activate qi, the fastest way is to use a small electric current to stimulate the acupuncture points, so your body will feel a little numb in a while. That's normal. There won't be a problem, right? Raito heard this and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He felt that his scalp was starting to numb. He felt like he was a death row prisoner sitting in the electric chair, and he was the kind that stupidly sent himself to the door. Of course there won't be a problem. As long as the position of the electric needles is correct, it should be successful. Of course, this is a test of the user's memory. Then your memory, no problem. Although I'm already 67 years old, my memory is still very good. When asked this question, Furumaki Sotaro patted his chest and promised with a face full of confidence. However, Raito's rogue analyzer could clearly see that the old man's attributes showed that he was 69 years old. Very good memory. Wait a minute, didn't you forget how old you were? Instantly, Raito felt a chill down his spine and quickly asked, wait, actually, is there any other way to activate chi? Don't talk, let's start, or you'll bite your tongue. Without waiting for Raito to hesitate for a while, the old man had already pulled down the switch very quickly. Almost at that moment, Long Do felt as if his head had been pierced by a bolt of lightning. His eyes were pale white, and there were constantly snowflakes like old TV shows flashing crazily. This is the legendary electric shock therapy. When the electric current entered Raito's body, he wanted to move, but he couldn't even move a finger, and his body was even slightly trembling. But under such circumstances, Long Do felt that some parts of his body were moving with a fluid that he couldn't touch or see, but he could clearly feel its existence. Chapter 217. This flowing thing was like a stream of water, spreading from the various acupuncture points all over his body. It was particularly obvious in the current situation where his body was numb. Obviously, this was the mysterious power called chi that Furumaki mentioned before. Chi was attached to his body like a cloud, as if the blood in his body also flowed with the flow of chi and mixed with it. Chi and blood, in many ancient Qigong theories, chi and blood were inseparable. Previously, it was difficult for Dragon Fight to understand this concept, but now he had a rough idea of what it meant. Hiss. Just as Raito felt the movement of chi and blood, Furumaki also turned off the switch and released Raito from Professor Young's kiss. Looking at Raito's thoughtful expression, the old man also smiled and asked, "How is it? You probably understand now, right?" "I understand, but it's difficult to describe in words." After thinking for 2 seconds, Raito gave such a vague answer. For the human body, the opening of chi or human microelectromagnetic field was like swimming or riding a bike. It was a pure physical memory. These movements and techniques were actually difficult to describe in words, and it was also difficult to think about what was going on in the mind. In short, once you know it, and once you learn it, you can never forget it in your life. It's just that the opening and mastering of chi was a mysterious state. It was many orders of magnitude higher than swimming. The difficulty of opening it was extremely high, and the difficulty of mastering it to be able to use it in battle was even higher. After the stimulation of the acupuncture points just now, although Raito had begun to perceive the existence of chi, this level of opening was only a pure beginner level, equivalent to swimming to the level where he could just float on the water. When Long Do stood up, the old man held one of his fingers. Focus on the tip of this finger. You need to learn how to use your mind to control the movement of your chi and blood. Only then can you use chi to produce force. As the old man reached out to hold that finger, Long Do could feel a warm wave of air coming from that finger. Unknowingly, he also focused his attention on that finger. He could feel the invisible chi and blood gathering at the tip of his finger, but when he moved slightly, the gathered chi and blood disappeared in an instant. But according to the old man, this situation was completely normal. It took a long time to condense one's chi and blood in a certain part of the body, and it took even longer to make the body muscles tremble to transmit force. Even if it was only the most basic obvious force, it was impossible to develop it without 7 or 8 years or more than 10 years of effort, at least from a traditional point of view. But no matter what, the chi in Raito's body had reached the preliminary level. Although he hadn't mastered it yet, it did exist, and he had achieved his goal tonight. Remember, before your chi reaches the level where you can use hidden force, don't fight with Saitu. A real man doesn't lie. Before Raito left, the old man Furumaki couldn't help but remind him again, as if he was afraid that this kid who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth would go to his death openly. Don't worry. Raito nodded with a smile and said solemnly, "If I break this promise, I won't be able to get a wife in this life. Is that okay? The old man knew that Raito was an old pervert who was going to marry 3 wives, so this vow was poisonous. Thus, he nodded at the disciple who had made the oath, believing his words. Sigh. I hope that Gai Saitu can die of old age early. Hopefully, he won't live until Raito masters hidden force. Looking at Raito's back, the old man who stayed in his small broken house sighed. Then he took out a straw doll with Saitu entering the Dao from the drawer, picked up a hammer and nail, and nailed it on the wall as if he was cursing that guy to die early. Of course, Raito didn't want Saitu to die early. He just wanted to kill that bastard with his own hands. Rustle. Puff puff puff. However, on the way back, Long Do, who was sitting in the back of the car, couldn't help but let out a burst of strange laughter, which made Ming Hai, who was driving in front, feel a little confused. What's wrong with the boss? After entering the old man's room for a while, he laughed like this. Did something strange happen? Thinking of this, Narukai's forehead couldn't help but drop a few drops of cold sweat. Raito naturally didn't know what this capable assistant was thinking, because he was already immersed in the pleasure of shopping. Now, Raito's personal attributes were like this. Name, Raito Kyriage, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV2, Physique LV4, Courage LV3, Insight LV2, Charm LV4. Chi opening rate, 1%. Title, Beginner Assassin, obtained after 100 successful sneak attacks, presence reduced by 20% when equipped, equipment, Uzi submachine gun, rare, hook lock, good, equipment, none tools, rogue velcro, rogue analysis mirror, rogue voice changing mask, rogue glider skills, ancient Bajikan, Furumaki style martial arts, iron bone mastery, copper skin mastery, parkour master, rogue immortality, silent movement, aura shield, omnipotent driver. Total assets, $172,870,000. Sure enough, this time there was an additional chi opening rate in the attribute pane, which represented Raito's mastery of this new ability. 1% mastery was almost the beginner level, there was no way to use it in actual combat. But fortunately, the current Raito was still quite rich. At first, he saved 120 million to buy the special medicine to treat Rui Hui. After upgrading his charm, he spent 50 million and had about 70 million left. As for the remaining 100 million or so, it was a part of the assets that Raito plundered when he led the team to eliminate the White Tiger Gang and Psychedelic Soburo. Of course, the cash in the hands of the 2 gangs was definitely more than this, but after all, Kai Yang and Tessa were among the people who raided the property. Everyone had to divide the assets equally. And after the assets were divided equally, most of them had to be transferred to the public account of the Rulon Group. Raito himself could only get a part of it, which was about 100 million or so. But even so, 100 million or so was not a small amount, not to mention that after 3 days, there would be a larger sum of 300 million, which was the money for John's redemption. In other words, until the princess coming of age ceremony a week later, the amount of money that Raito could use was about 470 million or so. It could be said that it was the largest sum of money he had so far. At this time, Raito had to think about how to use this large sum of money. He now had the attribute of LV4 Physique, International Warrior. Chapter 218. Therefore, after looking around, Raito chose the most basic Chenkuan foundation building technique. He wanted to see what kind of changes would happen to the chi opening rate after cultivating the Neigong. However, the price of Neigong skill books was extremely high. Even the most basic skill book cost 20 million each. It was simply daylight robbery. Following his purchase of the skill book, Chenkuan foundation building technique appeared in Raito's skill bar. At this moment, this was the description of this skill in Raito's skill bar. Skill bar, Chenkuan foundation building technique, able to increase the opening rate of chi, 20% proficiency. The description of this Neigong skill was very simple. After learning it, Raito's attributes immediately changed. His chi opening rate was originally only 1%. After learning the Chenkuan foundation building technique, it immediately became 10%. Compared to before, it had leaped by 10 times. However, This 10% chi opening rate did not match the 20% proficiency of the Chenkuan foundation building technique. It seemed that for every 2 points of Neigong proficiency, the chi opening rate would only increase by 1 point. In other words, if he wanted the chi opening rate to reach the highest 100%, he would have to buy at least 2 Neigong skills and raise them to the maximum value. At least 2. Then he would choose this as the second option. After choosing for a while, Raito set his sights on a Neigong skill called Empress Mysterious Technique. The basic effect of this Neigong was to increase the chi opening rate. However, there was an additional effect which was to increase the yang chi of the cultivator. On Raito's body, it would be, cough cough, good for them, good for me. Raito admitted that when he chose this skill, he had some impure intentions. However, he had no choice. Who told Raito to have 3 wives in the future? Moreover, one of them was a carnivorous woman like Yunyang. If he did not have the means to strengthen that ability, he might die in bed one day. That would be too stupid. Just like that, Raito spent another 20 million yuan to purchase the Empress Mystic skill, increasing his chi opening rate to 20%. At this moment, Raito came out of the system world and slowly extended his right hand. With a thought, a chi that was much hotter than before gathered on the palm of his hand. Moreover, it did not dissipate as the palm moved up and down, left and right, and rotated. It was still firmly wrapped around the palm of his hand. So that's how it is. Is this the situation after mastering chi? I feel like my body has become 2 layers. In layman's terms, after mastering chi, one would feel as if there was an invisible person in one's body. When Raito used his mind to control his body, he could also control the person in his body to perform the same or different actions. Not long after, Raito returned to the headquarters of the Rulong group and returned to his room. At the door of the room, there was a tree that was more than 20 centimeters thick. Raito came to the front of the tree and threw a punch at it. At the same time, he mobilized the chi in his body and spread it in that direction. Boom! When the punch arrived, the tree broke. The tree that was more than 20 centimeters thick was smashed like a bubble by Raito's punch. The most important thing was that Raito did not use much of his physical strength. Instead, he relied on the clear force produced by his chi to shatter the tree. With a chi opening rate of around 20%, he could already use the first stage of clear force. In other words, this was equivalent to Raito skipping the years of hard work that Furumaki Sotaro said in the blink of an eye. He suddenly had the strength of chi that was enough for actual combat. Oh! Is this the first stage of clear force? Amazing! After Raito tried a few times, he found that using chi to stimulate clear force at the same time while attacking could increase the power of the attack by about 50%. Don't underestimate this 50%. Now that Raito had LV4 physique and the high lethality of ancient Bajikan, one attack was already fatal. On this basis, an increase of 50% was already quite terrifying. The most important thing was that now Raito's chi opening rate was only 20%. In other words, he still had a lot of potential that had not been fully utilized. In the not-too-distant future, if Raito could have LV4 physique and chi opening rate of 100%, even he himself could not imagine how terrifying it would be. It was probably not much different from Superman. But even so, in fact, the current Raito was already on the road to becoming Superman. However, just as the youth here was immersed in the excitement and joy of getting a new toy, time passed by and the next morning came as promised. It had to be said that this was a depressing morning. The wind was strong, the rain was sudden, the dark clouds covered the city. Early in the morning, there was a continuous drizzle, giving people an ominous feeling of dark clouds covering the sky. However, in a villa with a huge courtyard in Tokyo's Chiyoda district, the master who lived here was obviously not overwhelmed by this depressing morning. Classical, solemn. First of all, after seeing this courtyard, the first words that would appear in the mind would be these 4 words. Although the modern world was like a wheel that forced everyone to move forward. However, this place seemed to have been frozen in time hundreds of years ago. The small stream flowed, the antique atmosphere, the green vines, and the various flowers and plants naturally set off the taste and value of this place, making it appear very fresh and elegant. And in the middle of this courtyard, there was a clear pool in a bamboo forest. Not far away, there was a brick path that led to a secluded place. The flowers were deep and the house was quiet. It was really a good residence. But this early in the morning, a very short figure was not afraid of the drizzle, standing alone by the spacious pool. Taking a closer look, this Saitu Ryu martial arts master, Saitu Ryu Do, was wearing a simple and loose outfit. His eyes were closed, and he was squatting next to the pool, as if he was concentrating. Hiss. After standing for who knows how long, Ryu Do suddenly inhaled, his short neck stretched out, his nose and mouth were like a suction fan, quickly inhaling the surrounding air into his abdomen. This time the inhalation was very fierce. The inhalation lasted for more than 10 seconds, during which there was no pause at all. Even in the process of inhaling, Ryu Do's abdomen was violently expanding, like a huge toad. At the same time, the man's limbs and all the muscles on his body were constantly trembling in the process of inhaling, as if they were being attacked by an electric current, as if every muscle had its own consciousness. Hiss. Hiss. After inhaling enough air, Ryu Do once again exhaled, only to see a huge wave of air gushing out from his mouth. The small pool in front of him rippled, as if it was being attacked by a gust of wind. Such a terrifying inhalation and exhalation, it was hard to imagine that it could be done by a human. If a thin and weak person was standing in front of Ryu Do, perhaps this breath would have blown him a few meters away. The terrifying scene just now was the result of one of the most profound energy arts of the tantric schools, the art of the lokapla imparting profundity, a breathing incantation. Through breathing, constantly guiding the chi in the body to flow around the body, thus stimulating every cell, and maximizing the potential within. It could be said that in terms of the cultivation of qi, entering the Tao had already reached a rather profound realm. This was definitely not something that Long Do's petty 20% qi opening from yesterday could compare to. Clap clap. Clap clap clap. Just as he was about to complete his morning breathing technique, a crisp clap suddenly rang out from behind him. Good morning, Mrs. Kawata. With the strength of Ryu Do, naturally, he had already noticed the figure standing at the garden entrance not far away. He also slowly turned around, and nodded to the woman in a western dress. There was no doubt that the woman who appeared in the courtyard of Ryu Do was the current owner and savior of Ryu Do, Kawata Ya. From the outside, Kawata Ya was a middle-aged woman about 40 years old, but she obviously took good care of herself. Although she was not as beautiful as Rui Hui, who completely ignored the passage of time, she was still a dignified and elegant lady. Unlike most people's impression of Japanese empress, Kawata Ya was wearing a Western-style high-collared, long-sleeved dress made of velvet fabric. It looked graceful and elegant, and it was quite a perfect match for her temperament. Such a very capable woman, if there was no special indication, it was hard to imagine that she was the daughter-in-law of the Japanese royal family, the wife of the current Emperor Wu Toku. Moreover, after witnessing the breathing exercise of entering the Tao, which could be called a stunt performance, her expression did not change. Her expression was calm and natural, showing a calmness and courage that was completely different from that of ordinary women. Of course, Kawata Ya was such a person. After all, she was a woman who wanted to do great things, whether it was wisdom, courage, knowledge, or will, they were all at the top level. Mr. Ryu Do, last night you saw Raito Kiri again. What do you think of him now? When Kawata Ya said these plain words, it gave people a sense of stability, as if everything was under her control, even if it was a question. Obviously, this was a very easy woman to trust, because by her side, one would feel very calm. From a certain point of view, Kawata was actually the same type as Iheim. But when he heard that name, Ryu Do frowned slightly, and said with disdain, "He is far from being my opponent now." In other words, you can kill him at any time, right? Not necessarily. Oh. Kawata Ya originally thought that Ryu Do would say at any time, but she didn't expect him to say such a sentence. Chapter 219. Judging from his disdainful attitude towards Long Do when he had just entered the Tao, logically speaking, he should have looked down on that stinky brat. But in fact, that was not the case. Although he is not as good as me, he is already an outstanding expert of the younger generation, Plus that kid has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. I dare not say that I can take his life at any time. Speaking of this, Access to Dao couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, he couldn't help but think of the scene last night. In the battle on the roof last night, Access to Dao clearly had the upper hand, but there was not a trace of fear on that boy's face. As everyone knows, there is no one who is not afraid of death. If someone feels that they are not afraid of death, it can only mean that they have never been close to death. Even Access to Dao, who has been on the verge of death dozens of times, will still unconsciously feel fear when facing the threat of death. This is human instinct. But last night, Raito's eyes and expression didn't show the slightest fear, as if he was sure that he would never die. Seeing that calm expression, Access to Dao didn't show any reaction on the surface, but in fact, he was very surprised. He is not afraid of death. No, he doesn't think that he will die at all. This kid must have hidden some powerful tricks up his sleeve. For this situation, Access to Dao can only explain that the kid still has some tricks up his sleeve. That is the only reasonable explanation. After all, he didn't think that there would be a person in the world who would buy a life for $1 million. This is a bit too outrageous. So that's how it is. This is Raito Kiri. Even this kind of person who can almost be called a monster is not sure that he can kill him. Unfortunately, there is no way to recruit this kind of talent. If he falls to that point, he can only blame himself for not knowing how to appreciate kindness. After discussing a few more details with Access to Dao, Xiao and Tianye slowly walked outside to prepare for the princess coming-of-age ceremony that would be held 6 days later. But as the mother of Princess Fukudaheim, Kabato was responsible for preparing things that had nothing to do with her daughter, as if she didn't care about her daughter's situation at all. In fact, it was true, Kabato didn't care at all. The only thing she cared about was her career and her mission. His daughter was just an accessory in the mission. After the Empress left, Yi Zichen came to a bamboo forest by the pond alone. While enjoying the beauty of nature, he slightly raised the qi in his body and infused it into the finger of his right hand. He then pressed it down on a bamboo joint beside him. Crack. When the finger slowly pressed down on the hardest part of the bamboo joint, a crisp sound rang out from the bamboo joint. As the hand that had entered the Dao slowly returned to its original position, a 3-inch deep fingerprint was left on the bamboo joint. Vajra's finger. This was the martial arts technique that was casually used by those who had entered the Dao. If he were to use this move with all his might, even the strength of one finger would be enough to pierce through a steel plate. As for the human body, except for the brilliant martial artists who could use their qi and blood to strengthen themselves to a great extent. An ordinary human's body was like tofu in the eyes of those who had reached the Dao. They could destroy it however they wanted. Logically speaking, with his strength, even if he fought Raito 6 days later, he could easily kill him. Even so, now that he had stepped into the Dao, he felt an indescribable sense of foreboding. Why? Why do I have this kind of feeling? He's just a teenager, who hasn't even released his qi. How can I be afraid of him? After shaking his head, Yi Zichen tried to get rid of the distracting thoughts in his mind as much as possible, not letting himself think about it anymore. Raito Kiri. 1 week later, either you die, or I die. Before leaving, Yi Zichen finally said to the reflection in the pond. Obviously, he had made up his mind to take Raito's life the next time they meet. 6 days. There were only 6 days left before the princess coming-of-age ceremony that was destined to be a stormy event. In these 6 days, no matter what kind of thoughts people had about the upcoming event, or what kind of preparation they were secretly doing, the carriage of time would always reach the end without them noticing. 6 days later, in this late spring day, the wind was blowing, the flowers were blooming, and the young princess from the oldest family in Japan, Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony was also coming. Due to the particularity of this festival, for today's Tokyo and even the entire Japan, today can be said to be a day of great attention. As everyone knows, the Japanese royal family has completely fallen to the status of mascot in this era. But even so, the country still has to spend a lot of money to support them and let them enjoy a luxurious life. Although some people have also raised some objections, but supporting the emperor family is actually like raising pets in captivity for this country. In essence, it is no different from the pandas in the zoo. It's just that the emperor family eats more and takes more than the pandas, so they have to pay more. Among them, the biggest cost is naturally the daily life and personal privacy of their own family. As the mascot of the whole country, almost every move of the royal family is under the attention of the people. It's hard to say that there is any privacy, it's like a living display in a glass window. Especially an event like the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, which was supposed to be a joyous event for the whole family and no foreign guests, had long become a national entertainment that was broadcasted live and filmed by every TV station. After all, at this coming-of-age ceremony, you can see many ancient and cumbersome traditional customs, and you can also see the empress family collectively appear in the kokyo and take photos together. The feeling is much more interesting than going to the zoo to watch gorillas perform airplane shooting. And all these special performances will take place in the kokyo, in the tower that has spanned decades of history and was bombed and rebuilt by American. Kokyo, as the name suggests, is the residence of the empress family. This kokyo was located in the central area of Tokyo-Chiyoda. Surrounded by water on all sides, the kokyo was quite conspicuous in the busy streets. In particular, the quaint palace building was even more out of place in this world. The surrounding moat separates the kokyo from the bustling modern city. This makes the palace where the emperor lives not so much like a palace, but more like a lonely city on an isolated island. Generally speaking, except for the outer areas such as the East Court and Kitano-Maru Park outside the kokyo, the palace area covering an area of about 2,500 hectares is not open to the public, and there are not many people in it at ordinary times. Of course, it doesn't mean that there are no people today. After all, starting at about 10 o'clock this morning, the particularly eye-catching Princess Fukudaheim's coming-of-age ceremony will be held inside the kokyo. At that time, a large number of political and business leaders will gather here. Therefore, just before the hour hand in the morning pointed to 10 o'clock, a large number of reporters from various TV stations and online programs have gathered near the kokyo outside the kokyo. They all set up their cameras and bombarded the guests who came to watch the ceremony indiscriminately. It's coming. Whose car is that? It seems to be the president of the Sai Ling Group. Hurry up and take photos. Hey, isn't that the CEO of Uni? Didn't he just promote abroad yesterday? He actually rushed back here early in the morning. That is the national treasure level cooking immortal master Millet. It is said that he has been cooking for 100 years. He is a living immortal. For the reporters stationed in Tokyo, today was undoubtedly a great day, because they could unscrupulously take photos and videos of this group of celebrities, who were rarely seen in their daily lives. The guests who came to watch the ceremony got off in front of the kokyo and walked to the inner kokyo. Some walked quickly with their heads down, and some politely waved to the reporters in the distance. The guns and cannons on both sides of the road kept flashing. It didn't feel like a royal princess's coming-of-age ceremony. Instead, it felt like a strange fashion show. However, such a happy atmosphere completely disappeared with the appearance of a black car with a dragon's mark on the front hood. Rumble. Rumble. Accompanied by a very arrogant engine sound, the black car that didn't look low-key at all stopped outside the kokyo, and the royal etiquette officer standing at the gate in charge of greeting also walked over as usual. Wait. That car. It seems to be the exclusive car of the leader of the Rulong Group, Tongshen Kazuma. When the reporters saw the car that exuded an aura that was out of place with the other visiting cars, they realized the origin of the car. After all, the exclusive car of the leader of the Rulong Group was quite famous. But according to the reporters' knowledge, Tongshen Kazuma was now a fugitive, and it was said that he fled abroad. Some people even saw him drinking vodka while fighting with a white bear in Siberia. Now, the second-generation Mu Tongshen Longdo was in charge of the Dragon Group. Although he was only 16 years old, it was said that he was vicious and merciless. His methods were cruel, and he was guilty of all kinds of crimes. He was the ultimate scum from head to toe. No way. Could it be? When they thought of this, some of the reporters trembled as they looked at the car that just opened the door. They saw the young man sitting in the back seat of the car step out. When the young owner of the car opened the door and walked out with the royal etiquette officer, he was exposed to hundreds of cameras. Almost everyone who saw him was stunned. Of course, The person who came to the princess coming-of-age ceremony in this car was Raito, who was warmly invited by the current empress. But today he was clearly dressed up, and he looked very domineering. Chapter 220. Because he was going to attend a formal event, Raito still wore a three-piece business suit with a high collar made of satin fabric, which made him look more mature and decent. However, unlike the one he wore in the Star Python apartment, the suit this time was white, and there was a very conspicuous dark golden dragon embroidery from the back to the shoulder area. The white suit was adorned with black dragon embroidery. The contrast of white and black accentuated this young man's characteristics to the greatest extent, especially the gold-rimmed black dragon that was baring its fangs and brandishing its claws on his shoulder. It simply made people feel that unconventional domineering demeanor with just a glance. The most exaggerated thing was that after getting out of the car, Long Do actually wore a pair of pure black sunglasses that he usually didn't wear. It made his originally very lethal and fierce face even more intimidating. "Please, come in." After helping Raito open the door, the royal etiquette officer who came to greet him couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then a few drops of cold sweat fell from his forehead. Mph Long Do, on the other hand, stepped out of the car. His pair of sunglasses covered his eyes as he scanned the reporters around the Kikyo gate. He then strode in arrogantly without a care in the world. He slightly raised his head, straightened his back, stepped forward, and his hands moved rhythmically on both sides. The young man's walking posture was actually very standard, but for some reason, he always had a domineering and arrogant attitude that looked down on others. It was as if the magnificent Kikyo gate and the Kokyo in front of him were nothing in front of him. It had to be said that although Raito's attitude was arrogant, he was really handsome. His already handsome appearance, coupled with his level 4 charm, which was enough to become an international idol, and his unique clothing made him look like a dragon among men. It was as if a young godfather from a movie had come to reality. Because Raito's appearance and aura were too shocking, the surrounding reporters couldn't help but quickly raise their cameras and take 10 shots of Raito from all angles. Flashes flashed everywhere, and the sound of buttons clicking could be heard. For a moment, the entrance was particularly lively, and the expressions of the reporters gradually became excited. After all, it was rare for this all-powerful second-generation leader to appear in public, let alone in such a special place. However, when Raito sensed that a large group of people around him was taking pictures of him, he came to an area less than 10 meters away from the Bellflower Gate. He slowly raised his left hand and made an international friendly gesture to the reporters on his left. Convex before the reporters on the left could recover from their shock, he slowly raised his right hand and made the same international friendly gesture. Convex, immediately after, the reporters on the right were stunned. He raised his hands together and made a friendly gesture towards the huge royal palace in front of him. Convex. At this moment, all the surrounding reporters were stunned. The royal etiquette officer was also stunned. Not far away, the security team members who were watching the gate were also stunned. Am I seeing things? The leader of the Extreme Dao stood at the entrance of the Japanese royal palace and raised his middle finger to the surrounding reporters and the palace in front of him. Although most of the reporters were shocked by Long Do's actions, there were still a few brave reporters who took photos from various angles that would go down in history and posted them on the internet. XXXX year, the leader of the Rulone group, Raito Kiri, was paying his sincere respects to the Kokyo. At the bottom of the photo, the reporter used his trembling hand to type in this sentence. However, perhaps because the reporter was shocked, this sentence was not so much an introduction, but more of a sarcastic remark. It was not difficult to imagine what kind of sensation this photo and the fact that Raito went to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony would cause if it was posted on the internet. After all, it was already shocking that an Extreme Dao boss was invited by the royal family to attend the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, not to mention that he went to the palace and raised his middle finger. It was simply too arrogant. Although the royal power of Japan had declined, the Kokyo was still something that represented the face of the country. Unfortunately, the face of the country was now like being publicly slapped by the Extreme Dao young master, and it was a slap in the face. After all, who would understand the face of the country if you told Raito about it? Anyway, they had already shed all pretense of cordiality, so why should I save face for you? The most important thing was that this time, it was Kobayashi who strongly invited him to come, and for this invitation, she even used access Dao to threaten him. This kind of action made Raito very unhappy, so he had been prepared for the past few days. He was holding back his anger and was ready to make a scene inside. Kokyo, right. I'm here, don't regret it. However, just as he strode arrogantly into the imperial palace inside, what appeared in front of him was the royal palace square that was covered with gravel, grass, and trees. Standing in the palace square, one could see the walls of the palace and the famous scenic spot Mitsubishi Bridge. Mitsubishi Bridge was a special passage that led to the palace. It was said that only high officials and nobles could pass through this bridge. At this time, around the bridge and in the nearby square, there were armed guards everywhere. Obviously, for the princess's coming-of-age ceremony, the royal family had done enough preparation. When Raito stepped on the Mitsubishi Bridge, the guards on the bridge couldn't help but look at him with suspicion and vigilance in their eyes. After all, this guy's clothes, appearance, and temperament were not the same as the group of people who came to participate in the ceremony. This time, the guests invited to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony were all rich and noble. Most of them were members of the Yatsuki group, so their gestures revealed a fake upper-class atmosphere. But Raito was different. This guy looked like he was here to make trouble. After feeling the guard's vigilant gaze, Raito reached out his hand and pointed at his temple, and sneered, "What are you looking at? If you have the ability, then shoot me here. If you don't have the ability, then go back and drink milk." The guard who was ridiculed by Raito blushed, but he could only turn his head immediately and didn't dare to look at the extremely arrogant leader. Coward. Leaving such an appropriate adjective, Raito swaggered across the Mitsubishi Bridge and entered the palace area surrounded by the walls. The tall walls were filled with ancient trees, hundreds of thousands of trees from all over the country. The palace buildings were scattered among the trees, which looked very different from the palace imagined by ordinary people. The so-called palace here was just a house built with large stones. Looking at it, it was all green tiles and white walls. The chrysanthemum family pattern symbolizing the Japanese royal family could be seen everywhere. It was very coquettish. Such a complex of buildings was not lacking in elegance and simplicity, but it lacked a bit of vastness and grandeur. If someone told you that this was a desolate resort villa, no one would not believe it. Because of the preparation of the celebration, the interior of the palace was very lively. Everywhere you could see people walking in the direction of the main hall or chatting under the surrounding eaves and trees. Most of this group of people were well dressed and elegant. At first glance, you could tell that they were serious guests, unlike Raito who was dressed like a noisy upper-class hooligan who came to make trouble. The main hall of the palace was the center of the palace. The main activities of the royal family and diplomatic ceremonies were held in the pine pavilion of the main hall. Under the surprised, disgusted, and curious gaze of many people, Raito swaggered to the entrance of the main hall. But just as he was about to go in, a hand patted his butt. Although Raito was indeed very handsome and charming, there were not many people who dared to take advantage of him like this. Section Chief Teshima, it's not good to greet in public like this. However, although he was patted on the butt, Raito could only reveal a dumbfounded expression. He turned his head and said to the female section chief who was hiding in the corner. She looked cold but secretly touched a man's butt. Of course, the one waiting for Raito here was naturally the section chief of the Search Division 1st Division, Teshima in Hana. Today's Teshima in Hana was different from the time when she went to the Rulone Group headquarters to investigate. Because it was a formal occasion, she wore a valiant policewoman uniform and also put on light makeup. This kind of outfit made in Hana look more beautiful. Coupled with her dignified and cold appearance, her incomparably flirtatious personality was even more tempting. No matter how you looked at it, she looked like an indecent policewoman who would appear in a small movie or a small manga. As a high-ranking member of the Metropolitan Police Department, Teshima in Hana was naturally qualified to participate in such a celebration. But after seeing Raito, she tilted her head and signaled the two to talk in detail. Then she walked to the side of the garden. What does this girl want to do? Is she trying to take advantage of me at this time? Looking at the figure of Inhanna walking to a secluded garden on the side of the main hall, Raito couldn't help but gulp. Due to the special nature of this operation, Longdo came alone. He didn't bring anyone with him this time. Although Rui Hui would also participate in this celebration, in order to not let people discover her special relationship with Raito, the two would not have any open communication in this celebration. As for Liu Li herself, she was with Ji and Jiao Yuan in a building not far away. They were ready to help Longdo deal with any trouble that might arise at any time, doing the logistics work. The other two leaders of the Black Hand Alliance, Kai Yang and Tessa, who were originally invited, directly rejected the request to attend this time and also advised Raito not to go. After all, the royal family was obviously up to no good. Why should he take the initiative to go there? Of course, Raito didn't understand Kai Yang and Tessa's thoughts, but young people had a rush. Even if it was a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, he still wanted to go there. Not to mention that the other party had provoked him in the face. If he didn't fight back, wouldn't it be extreme? Therefore, Raito decided to take a trip to the Kokyo, but he didn't expect to meet such a dangerous woman before entering the main hall. Although Teshima Inhanna's nominal identity was the section chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, don't forget that this woman was actually a general under Aiheim, the head of the Tianmu Group Guard Department. In terms of identity, the cadres of the minister were second only to Aiheim in the Tianmu Group, which meant that Inhanna's status was actually extremely high. The most important thing was that this woman also liked Raito very much, the kind of like that she wanted to eat him up. Chapter 221. It didn't take long for Raito to follow Lin Hua to a garden not far from the main hall. The garden was currently in full bloom. All kinds of flowers were contending with each other in terms of their beauty. The fragrance of the flowers in the garden assailed everyone's nostrils, causing the fragrance to spread from 10 miles away. However, after Lin Hua came to the corner of the garden, she looked around, and then quietly motioned Raito to stand in the corner of the flower bed. What's going on? Is this girl planning to do something to me here? Just as Raito was thinking about the scene where the two almost did it in the living room last time, Lin Hua had suddenly reached out and pulled his body into the flower bed. Plop! Accompanied by a muffled sound, the bodies of a man and a woman fell into the 1-meter-tall shrub at the same time, and formed a very ambiguous position of the man on top and the woman on the bottom. Hiss! Raito-kun, you are so handsome today. After falling into the flower bushes, the heroic and cold female section chief suddenly stuck out her rosy tongue and licked her lips that were smeared with lipstick. Then, she reached out and wrapped her arms around Longdo's neck, like a beautiful lady who was about to have an affair with her lover. Dong dong. When he saw Lin Hua's little tongue, Raito couldn't help but feel his heart beat faster. After all, he now had a preliminary understanding of the taste of women. In addition, the female section chief was still wearing an ascetic policewoman uniform. Her legs wrapped in grey stockings were wrapped around Raito's legs. Coupled with the encirclement of her arms, she pulled Raito closer to her delicate body. Their bodies were almost pressed against each other, and they were hidden in the sea of flowers that emitted an enchanting fragrance. The scene was extremely ambiguous. Suddenly, Raito could only smile bitterly. That. Lin Hua, it's not good for us to be like this here, right? What can I do? Who told you not to come to me during this time, little, bad, egg? Lin Hua said in a coquettish tone, while her head was close to Raito's ear, and she gently blew beside his ear. It had to be said that Tokushima Rahana was indeed top-notch when it came to seduction. At this moment, their bodies were stacked on top of each other. Raito could feel how bouncy her mature body was. Moreover, being blown by her ear like this, even an Iron Man would not be able to help but feel a little restless. If it was any other time, Raito wouldn't mind playing with this female section chief, even if it was to build a relationship with her in order to prepare for the fight with Aiheim in the future. But now was not the time. Besides, this was the famous Kokyo, the nest of the royal family, and it was the critical moment when the princess's coming-of-age ceremony was about to take place. Raito, a mafia boss, was fooling around with the head of the Metropolitan Police Department's investigation department in the garden of the Kokyo. If anyone were to find out, it would be the biggest mistake in the world. Even 100 bows from the Metropolitan Police Department wouldn't be enough as an apology. Of course, the most important thing was that the two were hiding in the flower bed. He didn't know if Colored Glaze, who was observing them from afar, would find out. If she did, it would be over. Since Raito decided to explore the tiger's den 6 days ago, he naturally discussed a lot of countermeasures with Colored Glaze and the others. One of them was the comprehensive surveillance of the Kokyo. In fact, from the Emperor's point of view, the location of the Kokyo was really awkward. After all, this damned place was in the center of Tokyo. Other than the green space and a few rundown houses in the middle of his house, there were tall buildings everywhere. Looking out from the Kokyo, the tall buildings were arranged in rows, and the glass walls were colorful. It was a sharp contrast to the so-called palace's cold color and stone walls. As mentioned before, the so-called palaces and other buildings here were very short. They didn't look like palaces, but more like some suburban holiday villas. Therefore, looking down from a high place, it was easy to overlook the Kokyo. In fact, this was one of the selling points of many buildings around the Kokyo. It could overlook the palace and the emperor's family from the top every day. It could be said to be the best place to see the monkey. In this case, Colored Glaze, Sensible, Gao Yuan, and the others rented some units on the top floors of the surrounding buildings. Then, they used high magnification cameras to film the Kokyo from all directions. They could almost see most of the scene inside. In order to prevent anything from happening to Raito, who was attending the ceremony alone, and also to prevent any possible tricks that Kawata might play, Colored Glaze and the others naturally kept an eye on the situation here. As for whether he would be able to see the dragon jewel in the corner of the garden, even he wasn't sure. If Colored Glaze saw him being pulled into the bushes by this woman, the consequences would be unimaginable. Raito would probably consider pulling out a gun and shooting himself in the head. As if sensing Raito's predicament, Rinhana chuckled in his ear. Don't worry, this corner is a blind spot in the Kokyo. It can't be seen from the outside. Don't worry about your little girlfriend finding out. You seem to know a lot of things. After hearing Rinhana's words, Raito couldn't help but frown slightly. This meant that Rinhana knew that Raito had sent people outside to monitor this place. And the head of the search department smiled. Don't forget who I am. You're living with Colored Glaze Kanzaki, and you're also related to Yunyang Tsuki. You're so young, yet you've already learned how to have one foot in two boats. How greedy. Logically speaking, even if Tejima Rinhana was the head of the search department, she might not know about Raito's personal situation. But if she knew about her second identity as the head of the Tenmu group, then it wasn't strange for this woman to know about these things. From the beginning, Raito didn't deliberately hide his relationship with Colored Glaze and Yunyang because it was useless to hide it. With Aiheim's intelligence-gathering ability, it was impossible for her not to find out. However, Raito pretended not to know about Rinhana's second identity at this time. Instead, he smiled bitterly. I didn't expect that the head of the Metropolitan Police Department would like to investigate these kinds of gossip. It's really a waste of talent. No, how can you say that it's a waste of talent? As long as it's related to Raito-kun, I want to know about it. Having said that, Tejima Rinhana reached out and touched Raito's face, then her fingers slid down his masculine cheeks, across his strong chest, abdomen, and then to his waist. Just when Rinhana's hand was about to touch a strange part, Raito finally couldn't help but hold her slender wrist, and his expression became a little awkward. Rinhana's fingers were soft and cold, and it was very comfortable to touch. If it was at ordinary times, Raito wouldn't mind being touched by her, but at this time, he didn't want to. Seeing Raito holding her wrist, Rinhana couldn't help but laugh. Oh, what's wrong? Are you shy? Haven't you done it with your two little girlfriends? We are still high school students, and we follow the proper etiquette when we communicate. You are obviously two-timing, But you still have the nerve to say that you are proper, what a little rascal. After being poked by Rinhana, Raito didn't know how to answer for a while, so he could only remain silent. Let's talk about something serious. Seeing this handsome Extreme Do group leader being forced to retreat step by step, the smile on Rinhana's face became even wider. She put on some light makeup to make her face look even younger and more beautiful. She moved closer to Longdo's face so that the two of them stared at each other. It was almost as if their noses were going to touch. Today, Kanata-chan and Tenya definitely don't have good intentions when they invited you here. You should have noticed this, right? That's for sure. After all, I have some history with that girl, and it's normal for her to want to mess with me. It would be fine if we were outside, but here, you are in a state of isolation and helplessness, which makes it easy for you to be at a disadvantage, so I think you need an ally, a reliable ally. In fact, from a practical point of view, Raito was not isolated and helpless, because his ally Kandai Ruehue was also present in the main hall not far away. Of course, Raito wouldn't be so stupid as to tell Rinhana such a thing, so he smiled gently and said, "Rinhana sister, the ally you are referring to, could it be yourself?" Smart. Rinhana licked her lips, and at the same time, she took a deep breath of Raito's majestic manly scent, and an intoxicated expression appeared on her face. Ever since she saw Raito at the Rulone Group headquarters, Tokushima Rinhana had always been very fond of this handsome and domineering young man. She even used him as a side dish for her DIY every night. In Rinhana's bedroom, there were pictures of Raito everywhere, and there was even Raito's pillow on the bed. It could be said that she had been deeply poisoned by this extremely handsome guy with LV4 charm. In fact, from Rinhana's point of view, she shouldn't be so close to Raito. After all, whether it was her identity as the Metropolitan Police Department chief or the head of the Tenmu Group, she had an absolutely hostile relationship with Raito. Raito would die at the hands of Iheim-sama sooner or later. This was something that Rinhana had already confirmed. However, if such a handsome guy who completely suited Rinhana's taste died just like that, in her opinion, it would be a bit of a pity. In other words, even if Raito had to die in the end, he had to be played with by Rinhana first before he could die. At the very least, he had to let her reach the pinnacle of 100 times. Therefore, getting Raito-kun's young and charming body as soon as possible was Rinhana's current biggest goal in life. So she said to Raito in a serious tone, "Raito-kun, come and be my lover. In this case, I will provide you with all my strength. Is this a deal?" Raito had long been mentally prepared for Tokushima Rinhana's request. After all, what was this crazy woman thinking every time they met? It was really a question that an idiot could think of. It's a deal, because our relationship is limited to lovers. Unlike your two cute girlfriends, you don't have to be responsible for me, and I won't be responsible for you. Let's just ask for physical and mental pleasure, how about it? Looking at Raito's hesitant expression, Rinhana panted slightly and said in a tone that seemed to be unable to hold back. Chapter 222. There was no doubt that Tokushima Rinhana was an infatuated woman, and it was the type that was obviously infatuated with Raito. Even in addition to being an infatuated woman, Raito also knew that this woman had obvious comedic tendencies, especially when she was tickled. She would be particularly happy. In the original Red Album 2, No Survivors, it was clearly shown how Tokushima Rinhana was subdued by Tenmu Iheim. In fact, it was just a tickle. La la la. Oh. Iheim-sama. Ha ha ha. It's so ticklish. You're really a pervert, Rinhana. Follow me in the future. Yes. Yes, at that time, the scene of Tokushima Rinhana being tickled by Iheim in the game caused a huge protest in the player community. The reason for the protest was very simple, because the characters in the game were not dubbed. In the case of no dubbing, the players could not hear the sound of Sister Rinhana being tickled. How could they not protest? The players condemned the game production company for being immoral. They couldn't even afford to hire a dubbing actor. Such a great scene without proper sound effects was simply a waste of God's gift. Because Rinhana's popularity was too high and the scene in the game was too famous, There were even players who spontaneously created Sister in Hannah's exclusive voice pack, specifically to match the scene with a suitable voice, so that the players would enjoy listening and watching. Of course, that was a matter in the game. In the real world, Tokushima in Hannah naturally did not need dubbing, her original voice was good enough. Especially when this woman with strange interests wanted Raito to be her lover, the devilish voice was simply devilish. If it was in the game, it would be at a level that would not pass the censorship. Dangerous. It's too dangerous. It can't go on like this. After feeling Tokushima in Hannah's obviously happy state at this time, Raito couldn't help but secretly frown. In fact, if in Hannah could become Raito's ally, then her assistance would be very useful in many of the following events. After all, this woman was the ultimate mole. But it was conceivable that if Raito now agreed to be her lover, then in Hannah would probably not hesitate to go on a rampage on the spot and directly eat Raito's skin. Although Raito was not a traditional man who treated sex as his life, in his heart, his own people should at least be given to his girlfriend, wife, or future wife. How could he give it to this kind of woman? So even if they were just lovers who used each other, Long Do didn't want to make this woman happy. Although he might be very happy himself, he would be letting Liuli, Yun Yang, and Downia down if he did that. But if he didn't agree to Hannah's request now, then she wouldn't help in the next princess coming-of-age ceremony. This was still a very troublesome matter. If Hannah could help in this incident, then Raito's chances of winning would definitely be much higher. He naturally hoped to reach an agreement with Hannah. What should I do? Should I agree? Or should I say, wait, didn't she just want to be happy? Then wouldn't it be fine to make her happy? However, just when Raito was pressed into the flowers by Tokushima in Hannah and could be eaten up at any time, his mind suddenly remembered the scene he had seen before, which was the scene where Iheim and Hannah tickled each other. If he wanted to make this female section chief happy, he didn't have to sacrifice himself for righteousness. He could use other means. When he thought of this, the corners of Long Do's mouth curled up into a smile. After that, he quickly moved Lin Hua's trembling body to the side with the moon in the ocean. Originally, Long Do was pinned to the ground, but with a flip, a grab, and a throw, he skillfully pinned the woman to the ground. Oh! After being pressed into the flower bed by Raito, the expression on Hannah's face became even more pleasant. She giggled, and after laughing for a while, she smiled and said, "So that's how it is. Do you like this kind of thing?" Then, slap. But before Hannah finished speaking, a palm had already scratched the itchy flesh on her abdomen at lightning speed. The speed was so fast that it was impossible to guard against it. Of course, Raito pressed this woman down for no other reason than that it was convenient to tickle her in this position. That was all. Although she was already over 30 years old, Hannah had always been very good at managing her body. Whether it was her waist or her arms, they were quite beautiful, and her skin was tight and elastic. With this scratch, Raito felt as if he was scratching a surprisingly soft and smooth jelly, and there was even an obvious rebound force. Puff! Ha 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 ha! After being scratched at the itchy flesh on her abdomen, the itch spread throughout her body along with excitement. Hannah's body trembled violently, and at the same time, she let out a strange laugh. Dragon! Raito-kun? You! Swish! Before he finished speaking, he reached out and scratched again, but this time, he scratched Hannah's armpit, which was more likely to itch. Moreover, from the looks of it, he seemed to be using more force than before. With Raito's current hand strength, scratching a person's body was no joke. He could really achieve the effect of scratching with a prop. Hannah suddenly opened her mouth wide. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't, and her body trembled even more violently. Her slender legs twisted subconsciously, and the more itchy it was, the more joy burst out in her heart, making her feel both physically and mentally comfortable. HMPH, 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 there's hope. Let's keep scratching. Seeing that this crazy woman was getting more excited the more he scratched, Raito did not hold back, and continued to scratch with both hands. Hualala, hualala, hualala. In this way, in the garden in the corner of the Kokyo, a subtle and strange sound kept coming from the flower bed, and it was not until 10 minutes later that it gradually returned to normal. When Raito was sure that he had scratched in Hana, the section chief of the search department had already collapsed on him like a soft noodle. Her eyes were blurred, and saliva was dripping from the corner of her mouth. Her pretty face was red, and she looked like she had laughed too much. Suddenly, Raito smiled and asked in her ear, "Sister in Hana, are you satisfied with my service?" If it was a normal woman, she might have turned hostile on the spot after being scratched like this, but in Hana looked very satisfied. She took a deep breath, reached out and combed her sweat-soaked hair, and replied weakly, "Raito-kun. I didn't know you had such an ability." I almost fainted from laughing. Hana did not know that Raito knew about her hobby. She only thought that Raito liked to play like this since he was born. For a moment, she liked this little handsome guy even more. Chapter 223. It was the first time Raito walked into this kind of palace building, so he looked around curiously. Because the event hasn't officially started yet, there were no guests in Pine Room. Only some staff members were fiddling with the wires, sound equipment, and so on for a while for interviews, audio recordings, and other activities. Putting a bunch of modern equipment in such an ancient palace greatly reduced the desire of others to visit. Although this palace was not big, it only took a few glances. Perhaps because there was nothing to see in the palace, most of the guests were either resting in the Thousand Grass Room not far away, or looking for people to chat in the palace. There were not many people like Raito who walked around alone. And because Raito's clothes were very conspicuous, when he wandered around, he could occasionally hear some comments. "Who is that young man? He looks quite handsome. He seems to be the second-generation leader of the Extreme Path organization, called something like Fighting Dragon." Fighting Dragon? What a strange name. It's really strange. It's probably the same breed as fighting dogs, fighting bulls, and crickets, ha ha ha. At this moment, a fat and wealthy merchant at the entrance of the main hall laughed heartily with his female companion who was hugging his arm as he watched the dragon fight. His words were full of joy. However, before they could laugh for a few seconds, a small stone flew out of nowhere like a bolt of lightning and hit the wealthy merchant in the teeth. Catcher. With a crisp sound, the two big front teeth of the rich businessman were directly broken and fell to the ground together with blood. Oh. Woo 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 woo. Ah. What's going on? Help. For a time, the rich businessman knelt on the ground while holding his bleeding mouth, and his female companion next to him was already scared. She could only cover her cheek and shout. This shout immediately attracted the attention of the guards standing inside and outside the main hall. The surrounding staff who were fiddling with the instruments were also startled. Some of the guests who were chatting around were also startled by this sudden scene. However, just as all kinds of screams, cries, shouts, and shouts rang out, creating a lively scene, the instigator, Long Do, had already slipped into a corridor at the side. There was no doubt that the small stone that suddenly flew out and broke the man's front teeth was naturally thrown by Raito with the skill hooligans don't die barehanded. As soon as this small stone was thrown, it directly gave the rich businessman with the foul mouth a crisp sound. He dared to show off in front of his female companion. Raito didn't bring a female companion, and he dared to bring her, and he dared to talk. It was simply a crime on top of crime. Just when Raito walked towards the corridor on the right, he actually just wanted to hide for a while, but he didn't expect to see a few strange guys walking towards him from the other end of the corridor. It was a group of three that looked strange. The middle-aged man walking in front had unnatural white skin. He wore a white robe with a strong holy aura, and on his head was a very recognizable black satin embroidered priest hat. In addition, this strange priest was holding a thick book with gold edges in his hand, and was swaggering towards him. However, compared to this strange priest, the first thing Long Do looked at was the two tall and burly men behind him. The two tall and strong men also had unnatural white skin, but compared to their skin, what was more unnatural was their body that was obviously more burly than normal people. It was as if they wanted to break through the bindings of their clothes, and their muscles were as hard as rocks. Even with a glance, one could see how powerful these two people were. However, this kind of burly body didn't match their heads very well, as if their bodies were forcefully inflated by something. An expert could easily sense that this wasn't a naturally cultivated physique. These two guys' bodies didn't seem right. It was a bit similar to that fatty from before. Seeing the group of three that was walking towards him, Raito immediately thought of one of the leaders of the psychedelic Soburo, Fatty Soburo. Although that fatty was born with a large skeleton, but because he had been using forbidden drugs for many years, it caused his muscles to swell unnaturally. It gave people a feeling that his muscles and body weren't on the same level. Oh, that's Russell, it really didn't take much effort. Just as Long Do was observing the two burly men, the priest holding the thick scripture also noticed him. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he walked over with a strange smile on his face. After arriving in front of Raito, the priest with a strange smile said with a smile, "Hello, I'm Father John of the Great Beauty Association, nice to meet you." After the self-introduction, he extended his hand towards Raito. The smile on his face was even more brilliant, and even the corner of his mouth almost reached his ears. It looked really strange. Father John. It's really this guy. Raito wasn't surprised by the appearance of this fake priest. After all, this fake priest was the brother of the Empress, so it was natural for him to appear here. Even if the Empress wanted to set a trap to deal with Raito, then he and his Great Beauty Association should also be a big force in it. Thinking of this, Raito also held Father John's hand with a smile and sneered, "Do you know that this half-foreign and half-local way of speaking makes you look like a bastard? I hate bastards." "What? You are so Arth." Just as Father John was about to say "you are so rude," a huge force suddenly came from the palms of the two holding each other. It directly squeezed the bones of the fake priest's hand until it made a cracking sound. At the same time, Raito pressed his wrist upward. Father John only felt a sharp pain in his wrist. His knees softened unconsciously, and he half knelt on the ground. Needless to say, the way he held his hands and knelt in the hallway made it seem as if Ryu Do was the god in this fake priest's heart. Although Ryu Do didn't need such a bastard believer. Under the stimulation of severe pain, Father John couldn't help but shout, "Let go! Let go! Help! Oh ho, don't you know how to speak the local language? Why do you want to be a bastard?" Raito continued to lock Father John's hand with a smile, and he suddenly threw a punch to the right without looking at the palm of a brawny man who was grabbing toward this side. The two brawny men behind Father John were obviously the bodyguards of the Great Beauty Association, and they were fed with forbidden medicine like Pang Sanlang. Their physical fitness was several times stronger than ordinary people. But just when the brawny man who rushed to the front stretched out his hand toward Raito, the punch hit his wrist like lightning. Crack! With a crisp sound, the brawny man's thick wrist was broken on the spot like a bubble. Even the sharp white bones inside had pierced through the skin and protruded out. Complex open fracture. If this injury was placed on ordinary people, they would probably be rolling on the ground in pain. But the brawny man didn't even frown, but he took half a step back and kicked out with his knee. He kicked his body, which weighed at least 150 kilograms, towards Long Do's face. Sure enough, it's the kind of modified person who can't feel pain, so troublesome. Just when Raito sighed that these guys didn't look like humans, the other brawny man also came around. He stealthily gave Long Do a bear hug from behind, firmly locking Long Do's body so that the youth had no way to block or dodge the next kick to his face. Although these two brawny men weren't martial arts masters, they were obviously veterans in fighting. They cooperated with each other quite tacitly and seamlessly. As the saying goes, random fists can kill an old master. For two brawny men to bear hug from the back, and the other to kick the face from the front, although it was very vulgar, even martial arts masters could easily fall for this unethical hooligan fighting style. But for the current Raito, this level of coordinated attack was simply no threat at all. Hiss. Me. Seeing that the kick that was enough to deform steel was about to hit his face, Raito quickly took a deep breath, and an unimaginable tyrannical force burst out from his right shoulder accompanied by a cold snort. Now that Raito's left hand was locked with Father John's palm, he could only move his right arm freely, but that was enough. Just when his right shoulder and arm swung to the side, the brawny man who was at least 300 pounds and about 2 meters behind him was directly sent flying as if he was hit by a truck. His whole body flew a few meters and collapsed on the floor behind him. In a situation where there was no room for him to use his strength, he was able to use only one arm to send such a strong man flying. This was not something that a person with LV4 physique could do. It was the ability of Chi. Using brute force to fight with the enemy was the lowest level of fighting method, using techniques was the intermediate level of fighting method, and the highest level of fighting method was naturally to use Chi to activate the force, only then would it be successful. But it wasn't over yet. In the next second, Raito's right elbow swept, and in a flash, his elbow hit the big foot that was kicking over. Along with a crisp cracking sound, the thick leg was also swept off. A few seconds later, before Father John could react, the bodyguards that he carefully selected from the Great Beauty Association had already uniformly fallen to the ground, one unconscious and one disabled. What the hell is this? Is he really human? Just when Raito pulled Father John up from the ground, Father John seemed to have seen a devil from hell, and not a living 16-year-old youth. Chapter 224. The two strong bodyguards who had been modified by various drugs had always protected Father John very well in the past. Both of them were not afraid of pain, and they were extremely strong. Their joint attacks were even more intimate. Even professional assassins would find it extremely difficult to get past them. However, these two extremely powerful bodyguards were like two clay figurines in front of Raito Kiri. He could pinch and play with them as he wanted. This was a scene that he had never dreamed of. Father John was so scared that his face turned ashen, and his eyes became flustered. Because the chaos caused by Raito in the main hall not far away had not subsided, the battle in the corridor here did not attract people's attention, but this was obviously bad news for Father John. Seeing that the fake priest's body began to tremble, Raito's face showed a kind smile and asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Why are you trembling like this? Don't tell me you're scared already." At this time, although Raito's smile looked very kind, it was extremely terrifying in the eyes of Father John. He almost peed out of fear. After a while, Father John could only stutter back, I'm here to invite you to go to Between the Plum Blossoms. It has nothing to do with me. Sister's order. Between the Plum Blossoms. So that's the case. Empress Kobata sent someone to invite me over for a chat. Raito knew that this Between the Plum Blossoms was the room exclusive to the Empress in the 3 rooms of the main hall. The Empress would conduct official activities here, and it could also be used as a reception room and lounge. What Raito didn't expect was that Kobata YA would actually take the initiative to invite him over. What kind of show is this? Is this girl planning to accuse me of molesting her as soon as I go in and take off her clothes? Isn't she a bit too naive? After knowing that it was Kawa Tanya's invitation, Long Do casually put Father John's head under his shoulder and walked forward like a dog. He smiled and said, "If that's the case, then let's go. The Plum Blossom room is here, right?" Seeing that Raito was going to pull him along, Father John quickly shook his head. "Wait, sister only invited you over, she didn't ask me to go with her." "Don't say that. We've already shaken hands. If a machine gun suddenly pops out of the room and shoots at me, then you have the obligation to block the bullet for me." What kind of logic was this? When he heard Raito's words, Father John's originally unnaturally pale face turned into a ghostly color, and his body couldn't help but tremble. Obviously, Kobata YA's invitation to Raito this time was 100% unkind. Who knows what kind of insidious means the Queen would play? Father John was the pathfinder prepared by Raito, or a walking million. No matter what happened in front of him, Raito would directly block this guy in front of him to make a friendly use of waste, so as not to inexplicably perform a sudden death. In this way, the two walked all the way forward in an intimate posture in the eyes of outsiders. They came from the side corridor of the main hall to the door with the plum blossom not far away. The door made of black wood exuded an antique atmosphere. The incense burners on both sides of the door were still lit with pure incense, rendering the surrounding atmosphere of Plum Blossom more elegant. However, compared to the heavily guarded situation in the main hall, there was no guard at the door of the Queen's office. This felt not right no matter how he thought about it. which increased the suspicion in Raito's heart. "You're older, you go first." After coming to the door, Raito opened the door with one hand and pushed Father John in with the other. Looking at his posture of pushing Father John forward, it was as if he was holding up a human shield with his hand. Along with the slight sound of the door being pushed open and the door being closed, after entering, the room was silent and not a single sound could be heard. Although it was the Queen's office, this plum blossom didn't look very big, but there were many screens blocking the view inside. Raito pulled Father John around the screens and walked forward. It didn't take long for them to come to the end of the room and finally saw the woman sitting on the office chair. "Raito Kiri, we finally meet." Seeing her brother being held hostage by Long Do like a dog, Cohesion YA, who was sitting on the office chair, didn't have a surprised expression at all. Instead, she said calmly. This calmness left a deep impression on Raito, especially after seeing Kobata YA's attributes. At this time, Kobata YA's attributes in the Rogue Analysis Mirror were like this. Name, Kobata YA. Age, 43 years old. Attributes, Wisdom LV4, Physique LV2, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV3. Judging from the level of each attribute, this woman was indeed an excellent talent enough to be a superior. Although they couldn't compare to Rui Hui and Yongji's superhuman abilities, Xiao and Tian Ya had 3 attributes that reached the level of an international warrior, which was quite amazing. It was the first time Raito saw Kobata Ya because she didn't appear in the game Red Album 2, No Survivors. This was a completely unfamiliar enemy for Raito. What would Owada Masa do? What does she want to do? What was his personality like? This was the key information that Raito didn't know. Even Rui Hui, who had been suspicious for a long time, wasn't very clear. It could only be said that this queen usually hid very well. Just as Raito was pondering, Father John, who was in his arms, whispered for help, "Sister, sister, save me." Ever since Long Do hugged his neck, Father John looked like he was about to die. But when he saw his sister, his eyes suddenly regained their vitality. "Big sister will come and save me. No matter what happens, my omnipotent big sister will be able to solve it." Obviously, in Father John's heart, sister was the omnipotent god, and the only god that Great Beauty Association needed to worship. However, Kobata Ya nodded slightly after hearing her brother's words and replied faintly, "Ying, your mission is over." "Yes, but sister, this guy doesn't want to let me go." Just as Father John, Kobata Ying turned to look at Raito, the queen sitting in the office chair pressed a button on the table, then something unexpected happened. Before Father John could finish his words, a mechanical sound of a spring suddenly came from the collar of his high-collared priest robe, and a cold light shot out from the inside of the collar like lightning. Because the speed was too fast, even Raito didn't see what happened clearly. It seemed that a sharp silk thread like a piano wire suddenly flew out from Father John's collar, and the silk thread directly cut through the middle of his throat, leaving a big gap in the neck of the president of Great Beauty Association. "Heh! This is." The next second, blood spurted out from Father John's neck like a fountain, and the fake priest reached out and touched the cut on his neck in confusion, as if he couldn't believe that all this actually happened. This white priest suit was sent by his most respected sister this morning, and she told him to wear it well in this princess coming-of-age ceremony. But what Father John didn't expect was that there was actually such a lethal weapon installed in the collar of the priest's uniform, and the person to be killed was actually himself. Sister, are you out of your mind?" Just as Father John struggled to fall to the ground, he raised his head with the last trace of strength and looked at the woman not far away who was looking down at her dying brother with a cold gaze. What was the reason for all this? Father John didn't understand, and Raito was also puzzled at first, but he immediately understood. This woman wouldn't be so ruthless. Long Do frowned slightly at the sight of Father John lying on the ground covered in blood. Then, he turned to the expressionless Empress Wutian Cohesion. Obviously, the younger brother of the Great Beauty Association and the Empress was dead. And the most important thing was that it was Raito, a hoodlum leader, who took him from the corridor of the main hall into the Between the Plum Blossoms. Judging from Tian Ya and Xiao Xiao's deployment, There should be many cameras outside that captured the scene of Long Do coercing Father John, who was Tianning and Xiao Xiao, walking in from the corridor. After that, Wado Young died in the between the plum blossoms, died beside Raito. So in the eyes of normal people, who killed the president of the Great Beauty Association? First of all, excluding the other living person, which was the current empress, the answer was self-evident. A Yakuza leader took the empress's younger brother hostage and broke into the empress's office. Then, he slit the neck of the empress's relative and the president of the Japanese-American Friendship Association. That was the truth of the whole thing, or rather, the truth that was fabricated. Raito couldn't imagine how much pressure it would put on him and the Rulon group, and even the entire Extreme Dao world if this news was spread out. Long Do couldn't help but applaud after understanding Konoha Tanya's plan. You're really vicious. You're even willing to use your own brother's life. Moreover, this guy is the president of that association, right? Don't you feel sad for him to die like this? The empress sneered, sometimes the living are not as useful as the dead. You don't have to consider my feelings, you should think about what you should do next. You killed the empress's brother in the Kokyo. Well, since I killed him, killing one is enough, killing two is a win, then I might as well take you with me. At this moment, Raito grinned, and killing intent burst out in his eyes. His body turned into a white shadow and directly pounced at Wado Young, who was a few meters away. Chapter 225. The current situation was very obvious, that was, this Empress Wuda planned to frame him. And it had to be said that this guy had actually succeeded. From the moment Raito took the initiative to bring Father John to Plum Garden and stepped into the door, it was already destined that this Extreme Do team leader would be framed to death. After all, in this plan, Xiao He and Tian Yue must have made sufficient preparations. This was the Kokyo, the territory of her, the Empress. In her own territory, the Empress was naturally in a state where she could cover the sky with one hand. It was easier than eating beans to frame an Extreme Do who was already full of black spots. If you said you killed him, then you killed him. If you didn't kill him, then you killed him. Therefore, it was impossible for Raito to get rid of this framing through normal means. It was impossible in any case. Therefore, in this round, Xiao Yu and Tian Yue won completely. Long Do could actually prepare to commit suicide and start all over again. But before committing suicide, he still had other things to do, and there were still many things to test. So in the next second, Raito's body flew over the front desk like a beast and rushed toward the Empress, who was slowly retreating. Now Raito's speed was so fast, and his lethality was so strong. If he was allowed to get close to Xiao Wakata, it would take less than a second to kill this Empress. But even so, there was still no trace of panic on Xiao Wakata's face. Obviously, this Empress, who had played through the conspiracy, had already expected that Raito would be desperate. Naturally, it was impossible for her to appear in front of him without any guarantee. However, even if she was mentally prepared, Xiao Wakata never thought that Raito's momentum would be so fierce. At this moment, the enemy's figure rushed over like an eagle. A fist that was not so huge, but seemed to contain infinite power blasted toward the Empress's head. The moment she was enveloped by Raito's fist wind, Kawata felt her breath catch in her throat, as if she was about to fall into a bottomless abyss. What a terrifying punch! Kawata had never thought that a human's fist could cause such a terrifying pressure. It felt as if a cannonball was flying towards her. If she were to take this punch head-on, she would definitely die. Moreover, it would be a very ugly death, where the entire head would be smashed into pieces like a watermelon. Unless there was a martial arts master who had also reached the transcendent state, ready to intercept Raito's attack at any time. Bang! Boom! Just as the punch was about to reach the Empress, Xiao and Tian Yue only saw a flash in front of their eyes, and a violent explosion accompanied by a strong shockwave directly exploded in front of them. She felt as if a grenade or some other kind of bomb had suddenly exploded a meter away from her. The explosion sounded again and again, and the crazy airflow even made the Empress, who had been training her body, unable to stand steadily. She almost fell to the ground as she retreated. Just as Xiao Wakata finally managed to stabilize herself by holding onto the wall behind her, the shockwave that engulfed the entire plum blossom garden finally disappeared, and most of the erected screens had already fallen to the ground. When the smoke dissipated, Xiao Wakata opened her eyes and saw the two men and the scene of two fists colliding with each other. One fist looked smaller, and the skin was tighter and smoother, showing the youthful physique unique to minors. The other fist was much larger, and the skin looked as rough as polished diamond sand, and it was covered with all kinds of scars. From the visual effect of the two fists, they were not on the same level at all. But when the two sides collided, it produced the terrifying shockwave that was like an explosion just now. From this point of view, the owners of the two fists were at least on par with each other in terms of strength. At this time, the man who suddenly rushed out from the side and met the Ryudo fist with lightning speed was naturally the strongest general under Owada Masa's command, Saichu Enter Dao. Xiao Wakata would definitely not do something as stupid as facing Raito Kiri alone. Therefore, she had already arranged for Daikai to hide behind a nearby screen, and he could come out at any time to restrain this crazy young man. However, after blocking Raito's punch, Daikai frowned slightly and said, "Stinky brat, you've improved a little. As the saying goes, once an expert makes a move, one will know whether or not he is an expert." From Raito's punch just now, Daikai could clearly feel that the quality of it was completely different from the fight in the Rulon Group headquarters a week ago. A week ago, Raito was just a martial arts rookie who only knew how to squander his powerful physical strength. Although he could also use some ancient martial arts that he had learned the essence of, as long as he did not know how to use chi, it was nothing in front of Daikai. But only a week later, when Raito appeared again, he was a completely different person. The punch just now seemed to be aimed at Xiao Wakata, but in fact, Daikai could clearly feel that it was aimed at him, which meant that Raito had actually discovered his existence long ago. Furthermore, within the fist force of that punch, those who had entered the Dao could clearly sense an unusually domineering force. It was as if the strength of Long Do's palm, wrist, arm, shoulder, upper body, waist, and lower body had all fused together at the instant he punched out. This caused the force to stack layer upon layer, and it was extremely turbulent like a huge wave. There was no doubt that this was a punch that could only be made after he had mastered the ability of chi and mobilized all the blood in his body. To be able to make such a punch, it meant that Raito was not as simple as opening up chi, but at least he had reached the early stage of being able to freely use obvious strength. Although it was only the early stage, it was enough to surprise Daikai. Speaking of which, it was already very unreasonable for such a young man in his teens to be able to practice obvious strength. The most ridiculous thing was that he did not even know what chi was a week ago. Monster. This kid was either a monster or a unique martial arts genius in history. He definitely couldn't let him leave this place alive. Daikai looked at Raito, who was urging his strength to block his fist, with an excited expression on his face. Daikai secretly gritted his teeth and made up his mind to kill him here no matter what. Otherwise, he did not dare to imagine what kind of existence Raito would become if he was given another 8 to 10 years. Perhaps he would become the kind of superhuman who could destroy the entire Kokyo with a single punch and would have to use kryptonite to deal with him. Just as Daikai secretly made up his mind, Raito excitedly smiled and said, "Shorty, actually I was wondering if I could break your fist with one punch, but in the end I still couldn't. What a pity." In fact, the moment Raito stepped into between the plum trees, he had already noticed the existence of Daikai. The punch just now was indeed not aimed at Cohesion YA. In fact, it was prepared to launch a sneak attack on Dao Accessing Realm. He wanted to see if he could trick him. Unfortunately, he did not succeed. This guy's fist was unbelievably hard. After hearing Raito's words, Daikai was stunned at first, then he suddenly became furious. "You stinking brat actually wanted to break my well-tempered fist. Who are you looking down on, bastard? Chimpate. Shameless boasting. You don't know what's good for you." Daikai snorted coldly, and his free left hand swung like a poisonous snake, swiftly launching a second attack. This was an earth-shattering claw, and a series of explosive booms erupted once again. The The Dao-reaching realm cultivator's rough palm was like a huge tower that was suppressing a white snake, and it grabbed toward Long Do's neck with immeasurable force. At the same time, Daikai immediately circulated qi throughout his body, and his entire left hand swelled up like a sponge that was full of water. The suddenly plentiful muscles directly burst the clothes on his arm from the inside, showing how strong his strength was. For a top master who could control qi to a certain extent, it was easy to freely shrink the size of his muscles and exert the strength of every inch of muscle to the limit. Although Daichi's body looked very short, after many years of hard training, his body was actually covered with steel-like muscles, and after the circulation of qi, it was completely reflected. Although his grab seemed light, it was actually the culmination of many years of martial arts techniques. The angle was extremely tricky, the speed was as fast as lightning, and the strength could easily twist steel into a fried dough twist. Unfortunately, although Daikai was fast, the current Raito was not slow either. His free left hand also swung out like lightning, and accurately grabbed Daichi's palm that was grabbing towards him. When the two hands collided, there was a sound of metal clashing. This sound made Kawata, who was hiding and trembling not far away, think that it was not flesh and blood that collided, but the steel hands of two robots. However, although Daichi's palm was grabbed by Raito, and it looked like they were going to wrestle again, Daikai was happy when he saw this scene. This idiot. Does he think that I'm going to compete with him in terms of grip strength? Back when the two first met in the Tokyo Emperor Hotel, Raito and Daikai had competed in terms of grip strength, and there was no clear winner. However, that was just a competition between Daikai, and it did not really reflect the strength of Daikai. After all, as a martial arts master, how could he only know such small tricks? He had mastered so many exquisite martial arts techniques that he did not need to rely on brute force to defeat Raito. And in this case, the power of Vajra Finger of Tantra could be fully displayed. A martial arts technique like Vajra Finger of Tantra could make one's fingers and palm as hard as Vajra. In addition to direct poking, palm, grabbing, and other common attacks, there was also the small grappling technique attribute in it. Chapter 226. There were many types of martial arts in the world, and each country had its own unique style. But at the end of the day, most martial arts were related to the four major systems of kicking, hitting, throwing, and grabbing. For example, Saichu Ryudo, who was born with a special physique and short limbs, was not suitable for kicking and throwing martial arts. Therefore, he focused his energy on hitting and grabbing. Needless to say, hitting martial arts, Ryudo's every move, every punch, and every palm were fatal. And in terms of grabbing martial arts, his lesser grappling technique was also top-notch. Generally speaking, grabbing martial arts were divided into lesser grappling technique that targeted the joints of the fingers, wrists, and elbows, and greater grappling technique that targeted the joints of the shoulders, knees, neck, and spine. This was especially true for the lesser grappling technique, which relied on small changes to win. Its moves were delicate and varied, and it could make infinite changes in a limited space. It was very suitable for Ryudo, who had already strengthened his fingers. Therefore, every time Ryudo fought with others in the past, Ryudo could use the lesser grappling technique to control the enemy's acupuncture points, joints, and other parts, and even destroy them. Stinking brat, your fingers are mine. The moment their palms touched, Ryudo sneered and suddenly squeezed his thumb inwards. At the same time, he twisted his index and middle fingers outwards, intending to break Raito's fingers on the spot. With such an exquisite lesser grappling technique combined with the ferocious power of the Vajra Finger of Tantra, there were not many people in the world who could block this move. Unless, the opponent had the ability to resist the lesser grappling technique and understood the lesser grappling technique very well. Therefore, in the next moment, something that Ryudo did not expect happened. Before he could fully execute his lesser grappling technique to break Raito's fingers, the young man suddenly twisted his wrist, and his left hand twisted inwards at a strange angle. At the same time, his elbow loosened and pulled, causing Ryudo's wrist to lose its strength. What the hell? Before Ryudo could react, he heard a strange cracking sound coming from his wrist. It made one's scalp go numb. Fortunately, Meng Qi was also a rare martial Dao master. His body immediately spun rapidly, and with the help of the spinning force, he forced Raito to let go and retreat. Only then did he escape from the young man's hands. This. My wrist actually. This brat also knows the small grappling technique. After the two of them separated again, Access Dao realized that his left wrist was hanging limply. Obviously, this was a sign that someone had dislocated his wrist. For so many years, only those who had entered the Dao could remove the joints of others. The number of times one's own joints had been removed could be counted on one's fingers. If the one who did this was a teenager, then the situation was even more terrifying. It could be said that Sai Tu had never been so shocked in his entire life. Even though he already knew that Long Do was a monster, he didn't expect this little monster to have such a high level of skill. In a split second, he was able to turn the tables on him. However, no matter how confused Access Dao's mind was, he was still in the midst of a fierce battle. He immediately grabbed the soft and slack left hand with his right hand and twisted it. Another crisp sound rang out, and the hand that had just been removed was deftly put back in place. However, although this kind of direct wrist dislocation technique was brilliant, it was accompanied by extreme pain. However, a tough guy like Access Dao obviously didn't care about such a small matter. At this moment, Raito's figure had already stepped to the side of Access Dao. He bent his knees slightly, and his elbow violently slammed into the enemy's head like a rapidly charging siege engine. Compared to ordinary people, Access Dao was short and small. Because of this, he was vulnerable to attacks. Some of the more conventional moves would be difficult to hit him, and he had to lower his body. Access Dao swung his right fist, using a clever move to remove the force from Raito's elbow, and then directly to the meridians in his arm. At the same time, his left hand moved from bottom to top toward Raito's nether regions. He was going to give him a monkey steals the peach. Although this kind of fighting style was a little dirty, it was a deathmatch after all. The winner was standing, and the loser was lying down. No one cared about whether it was dirty or dirty. This set of movements was smooth and smooth. The shadow of the fist was enough to kill. It was very dangerous. Of course, at this time, Raito was no longer going to be killed by this level of attack. Therefore, he nimbly turned around and dodged Access Dao's deadly punch. Just like this, the two of them fiercely fought in this small between the plum trees. They went back and forth, one retreated, and one advanced. For a time, the shadow of the fist flashed, and the force spread. The impact was like a storm that almost cracked the floor, ceiling, walls, and other areas of the between the plum trees. As for the original decorations inside, naturally, they were already shattered by this scene comparable to a monster battle. It was so messy that it looked like a garbage dump. However, when she saw such an exaggerated battle scene, Cohesion, who had already escaped from the back door and came outside to watch the battle, was already dumbfounded. What's going on? Are these two guys really human? Are they some alien creatures in disguise? Why do they look like they're in a movie? Although Owada Ya had many identities, was ruthless, and was knowledgeable, she was still a person who lived and grew up in modern society. Any normal person would find it hard to imagine that there would be such a monster in the world that could make the sound of metal clashing when a punch and a kick collided. The movement could even crack the floor and ceiling. The most exaggerated thing was that there was more than one monster like this. When Owada Ya saw the strength of Sai Tu for the first time, she was already very shocked. In her opinion, Sai Tu was like the hidden masters in the movies. It belonged to the top of human beings in the world. Unless various modern weapons were used, there was no way to fight against this guy. But what she never expected was that now, in front of Owada Ya, another monster of almost the same level appeared, and this monster was actually a teenager. This really made the queen almost numb. She even considered whether to capture Raito alive for research, but after considering that it was difficult to capture him alive, she reluctantly gave up this plan. However, when she saw the two terrifying superhumans fighting in the between the plum trees through the window, Owada Ya still thought for a while before pressing the emergency call button. Beep beep, beep beep, beep beep. Almost at the moment when the button was pressed, a fierce alarm spread throughout the between the plum trees, and even most of the guests in the kokyo could hear it clearly. At this time, the guests who had gathered in various corners of the kokyo and were about to come to watch the ceremony immediately noticed that something unexpected had happened. What's going on? Is there any movement over there? It's an emergency alarm, it's coming from the between the plum trees side. Then what are you waiting for? Run. Not long after the alarm sounded, most of the guests who had rushed to watch the ceremony quickly evacuated under the escort of the guards, and a group of armed guards also quickly rushed in the direction of the between the plum trees. Among the evacuating crowd, Ruehue Kamashiro, who was about to meet up with Raito, was naturally mixed in. That alarm. Was it Raito? What happened over there? Although Ruehue wanted to go over and see what was going on in the between the plum trees side, the situation now had become extremely chaotic. She was surrounded by people and armed guards who were evacuating in a hurry. Even if Ruehue wanted to go against the flow of people and return to the between the plum trees side, it was completely impossible. At the same time, Colored Glaze and the others who were watching from the top of a building outside the kokyo naturally immediately noticed the sudden chaos. It's Raito. Looking through the binoculars at the guests who were evacuating quickly, Colored Glaze immediately frowned and said, "It must be that guy who caused the commotion. This is troublesome." Immediately, Sensible, who was next to her, quickly asked, then, "Big sister, can we help the boss evacuate? Now that the kokyo is surrounded by a dense group of guards, it's impossible to go in and help. We can only pray that Raito can run out on his own, and will be outside ready to help at any time." Having said that, Colored Glaze couldn't help but sigh. At the same time, she secretly prayed that Raito could successfully escape. As for what happened after that, Colored Glaze had already made sufficient arrangements. No matter which direction Raito escaped in, there would be someone to help him immediately. However, just when the ear-piercing alarm spread throughout the kokyo, even the reporters outside noticed that an unprecedented event was about to happen. In the between the plum trees that was the focus of the crowd, a group of armed guards quickly rushed in with their weapons and surrounded Raito and Access to Do at the same time. Access to Do immediately fainted and retreated while blocking Raito's last escape route to the windowsill. "Stinky brat, you're finished." Seeing dozens of automatic rifles around him pointed at Raito's body, Access to Do sneered as if he was gloating. Although it was a pity that he couldn't kill Raito personally, Access to Do didn't mind using modern weapons such as firearms to send this brat to heaven. In short, it was fine as long as he could kill him. But what Access to Do didn't expect was that even in this situation, Raito's face still had a relaxed expression. "Oh, really?" he asked with a smile. "You don't think these broken things can kill me, right?" "Broken things? Mph, stinky brat, times have changed. Even if you have copper skin and iron bones, you can't block the power of bullets. Times have changed. It has indeed changed, but the person who will always walk in front of the times is me." As he blurted out "it's me," Raito's hand that was hidden behind him quickly flung forward. 3 flash bombs with the safety off quickly flew to every corner of the between the plum trees. Chapter 227. As for the princess coming-of-age ceremony incident this time, Raito naturally knew that the Stinky Queen must have a bellyful of evil tricks up her sleeves to kill him. She invited him over with malicious intentions. Moreover, this time, there was a mortal enemy in the enemy's camp, which made it even more dangerous. However, unlike the previous Downia kidnapping incident, after entering the kokyo this time, there were not many people who could help Raito except for Ruehue. Later on, he found out that Lin Hua could also be a helper. Therefore, before deciding to go to the Dragon's Den, Raito really had to prepare everything carefully. Especially after the 300 million yen ransom was transferred back by Jiao Yuan a few days later, the amount of money Raito could use to buy money was even more enormous. Raito had a huge sum of 172.87 million inch in his hands. Previously, after purchasing the Chen Kuan Foundation technique and the Empress Mysterious technique, he spent 40 million, so the total funds were left with 432. 8 million inch. With this money, Raito first needed to upgrade his basic attributes. Although it was not enough to upgrade his physique to LV5, it was enough to upgrade the other attributes again. Therefore, Raito spent a total of 150 million to purchase the second attribute upgrade of wisdom, courage, and insight respectively. In this way, Raito had the true bucket attributes of wisdom LV3, physique LV4, courage LV4, insight LV3, charm LV4. The significance of the consecutive upgrade of the three attributes was very obvious. This way, Raito's brain could work faster, and he could be more calm in the face of changes. His dynamic vision and insight ability would also be stronger. Now, although he was still not as invincible as an alien like Eheim, in terms of average attributes, he was already far above ordinary people. It could be said that he was developing in the direction of Superman. After purchasing the most important attributes, Raito continued to choose to purchase the large pile of skill books in the skill shop. First of all, he had to purchase Iron Bone Mastery and Copper Skin Mastery. This was the third time he had purchased these two skill books. While raising the proficiency to 60%, the price had also increased from 1 million to 2 million to 4 million. However, it was still worth it. After that, Raito chose to purchase two extremely useful combat skills, Rogues Don't Die by Bare Hands and Ancient 8 Extremities Fist. He spent 12 million yuan each to increase the proficiency of these two skills to 40%. Then, he looked at the blank skill book in the corner of the shop. Since Raito had died, this skill book that could increase the proficiency of any skill had been refreshed. However, the cost of the second purchase had doubled, becoming 20 million yuan. Raito still used this blank skill book to upgrade his Furumaki-style martial arts. After all, his skills in the shop could be upgraded by refreshing the shop to purchase skill books. However, this thing could not be bought by refreshing the shop. He could only use the blank skill book. After using the blank skill book to increase the proficiency of Furumaki-style martial arts to 41%, Raito unexpectedly learned a second skill, Profound Meaning of the Body, Hard Tackle. Different from Profound Meaning of the skill, Tiger Fall, although this Profound Meaning of the Body was also a counterattack skill, it was both offensive and defensive. It was a more hard-hitting counterattack skill. After learning Hard Tackle, Raito could contract part of his muscles the moment the enemy attacked, turning the hit point into a shield to destroy the enemy's fist. According to Raito's own experiments, this Profound Meaning of the Body, when used together with Copper Skin Mastery, Iron Bone Mastery, and Kai, the effect could only be described as invincible. In the experiment, he let Narukai use the katana to chop his hand with all his strength, and at the same time, he activated Hard Tackle. In the end, the katana was broken by Ryudo's arm. Ryudo's arm, however, remained unharmed. Ryudo could still remember Ming Hai's gaze, which didn't seem like he was looking at a human. After buying so many skills, Raito only had 240 million left in his funds. At this time, he had his eyes on the two new skill books that he accidentally saw. The first skill book was called Dragon Bone Dislocation Hand, and it looked like an ancient martial arts skill book of the grappling system of the grappling system. That's right, that guy who had entered the Dao had great martial arts skills, and he was very good at close combat. Should I get a grappling system martial arts skill to deal with that guy? When he saw this skill book, Raito had this thought. Currently, Raito's raw strength was not much inferior to that of a Daoist, but he was still far behind when it came to finer techniques. If he entered the stage of close combat, it would obviously be disadvantageous for Raito. Therefore, Raito spent 3 million to buy the Dragon Bone Dislocation Hand skill book, and learned this grappling martial arts skill that was known as grappling, breaking tendons and dislocating bones. This was also the reason why he suffered a small loss when he entered the Dao later on. The second skill book was called Firearms Proficiency, and as the name implied, it could increase the proficiency of various firearms, and was also worth 3 million. At this time, Raito already had considerable combat strength in hand-to-hand combat and weapon battles, but his only weakness was firearms. After all, no matter how strong Raito was, or how exquisite his techniques were, it was meaningless when he used firearms and other weapons to shoot. However, now that he had firearms proficiency, it was different. His ability to control firearms was much more proficient, and he could turn into Brother Ma at any time to shoot with 2 guns and go on a killing spree. However, after buying the 2 new skills, Raito was a little unhappy when he saw that Dragon Bone Dislocation Hand and Firearms Proficiency only had 20% proficiency. Thinking about it carefully, these 2 new skills, Heaven and Earth Foundation Technique, and Princess Mysterious Technique only had 20% proficiency, and it was probably not enough to deal with those who had entered the Dao. Should he try to kill himself a few times to refresh? For so long, Raito had not tried to kill himself to refresh the shop. The main problem was that the money he had on hand was very limited, and there was no way he could squander it like this. However, even after buying so many things, Raito still had a huge sum of more than 230 million on hand. Wouldn't it be a pity if he didn't refresh it? Most importantly, Raito had just received a huge sum of 300 million from Gao Yuan not long ago. If he killed himself now and went back to the time before he received that sum of money, wouldn't he be able to get it again? If he could get another 300 million every time he killed himself, then Raito might as well just keep killing himself. Wouldn't he be invincible if he killed himself a few hundred times? Although he knew that there was a high probability that such a good thing would not happen, Raito still changed to the Desperado title that reduced his money consumption. He reached out and poked his heart, listening to the familiar sound that began life rewinding. However, when Raito regained consciousness, he found himself standing in the same place with his phone. It was almost as if he had rewound to loneliness. Except for the loss of 800,000 yuan in Raito's fund pool and all the skills in the shop refreshed, nothing else changed. This was the backtracking point that Raito returned to. After thinking for a while, Raito finally figured out the judgment point of the system's backtracking with his LV3 wisdom. Every time the system should determine that the host is dead, it would let the host pay the money to go back in time. There were 2 judgment points for backtracking. The first judgment point was before the start of this incident. This was easy to understand. Most of the previous backtracking was based on this foundation. The second judgment point was what Raito just understood. That was after the money entered the account. After backtracking, Raito happened to be holding his phone. The phone showed that the 300 million yen that Gao Yuan had transferred had just been transferred to his account. And now the money in his bank card had become more than 230 million, which was the amount after the purchase. In other words, as long as Raito received the money, the backtracking point would immediately change from before the incident to after the money entered the account. This kind of backtracking point change could be said to block Raito's way of making money through crooked means. So, he couldn't rely on backtracking to get the 300 million yuan from Gao Yuan multiple times. No matter where he got the money, as long as he got the money, even if he committed suicide on the spot after taking the money, the backtracking point would become the moment he got the money. It had to be said that this pay-to-win system was really sneaky. It didn't allow people to take advantage of loopholes at all. But having said that, Raito also knew what he couldn't do, which was to take other people's money. If Raito had money in some events, then the backtracking point would change. This change might cause a situation similar to a dead file, leading to a dead end no matter how he backtracked. For example, Raito had just taken a sum of money, and then a bomb dropped and blew him to pieces. In this case, even if he backtracked, he could only backtrack to the moment after he took the money. As long as he couldn't run out of the bomb's range, he would die no matter how many times he backtracked. Of course, this kind of situation was very extreme and might not happen, but it was always right to be more careful. After backtracking, the shop refreshed again. Raito generously bought another round of Qian Foundation Technique 40 million, Princess's Mysterious Art 40 million, Blank Skill Book 40 million, Steel Bone Mastery 8 million, Bronze Skin Mastery 8 million, Ancient Bajikan 12 million, Hooligan Undying 12 million, Bone Twisting Hand 6 million, and Firearms Mastery 6 million. At this time, Raito only had 64 million yuan left. He took out another 30 million yuan to find his old friend from the Big Dipper Alliance, Kai Yang, and asked the strongest arms dealer in Tokyo to buy some heavy firepower equipment. After a round of crazy buying, 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 and buying. Longdo's attributes had become like this. Name, Raito Kyriage, 16 attributes, Wisdom LV3, Vitality LV4, Courage LV4, Insight LV3, Charm LV4. Chi opening rate, 41%. Title, Rich Fool, acquired after spending more than 500 million yuan. Equipment slot will increase by 2 slots. Equipment, AK-103 Assault Rifle, Elite, Rope Hook, good, Throwing Magazine, good, M60 Machine Gun, Elite, RPG-32 Individual Rocket Launcher, Elite, Personal Equipment, None Tools, Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror, Hooligan Voice Changing Mask, Hooligan Hang Glider Skills, Chen Kuan Foundation Technique, Princess's Mysterious Art, Ancient Bajikan, Furumaki Style Martial Arts, Bone Twisting Hand, Steel Bone Mastery, Copper Skin Mastery, Parkour Master, Hooligan Undying 12 million, Silent Movement, Aura Shield, Omnipotent Driver, Firearms Master. Total assets, 34 million yuan. With such ridiculous attributes, skills, and equipment, Longdo did not panic even if he was surrounded by dozens of armed guards who had reached the Dao-reaching realm. Chapter 228. In this situation where he was fully prepared, no matter how many enemies appeared in front of him, they were nothing more than cannon fodder for Raito. In an instant, 3 flash bombs with the safety off quickly flew to every corner of between the plum blossoms and exploded in the air. Although when entering the Kokyo, all guests had to go through a body search to ensure that they didn't bring any weapons, this kind of inspection was obviously useless against Raito. With the new title Rich Fool, Raito could now put as many as 5 pieces of equipment in his equipment slot. In addition to the 3 heavy firepower weapons, AK-103 Assault Rifle, M60 Machine Gun, and RPG-32 Rocket Launcher bought from Kaiyang, Raito also bought a grenade box, which could put 10 small hand-thrown ammunition. At this time, the grenade box was stuffed with a bunch of throwing weapons, from Raito's favorite flash bomb to the heavy firepower grenade to the smoke bomb. It could be said that there was everything. What? Just when the 3 flash bombs quickly flew in all directions, the guards who were ready to shoot at Raito were suddenly dumbfounded. Although the guards responsible for protecting the Kokyo weren't very powerful, they at least received some training. So when they saw the flash bombs flying in this direction, they didn't hesitate to lie down and cover their ears with both hands. Although this couldn't completely avoid the impact, it could reduce the impact to a relatively low level. Access to Do was even faster. The moment the flash bombs flew over, he had already rushed out of the room and quickly contracted the muscles in his ears to isolate the sound. Bang! Accompanied by a strong explosion and dazzling light at the same time, not to mention the guards in between the plum blossoms, even Kawata Ya, who was running outside the wall, was greatly affected. Bang! At that moment, Kawata Ya only felt a buzzing sound in her head, and at the same time, her vision turned white, and she almost lost consciousness. I'm. How did he do it? Just as Kawata was kneeling on the ground in a daze, she couldn't figure out how Raito managed to bring in so many flashbangs. A strong and powerful arm suddenly stretched out from behind and grabbed the Empress' collar, lifting her up from the ground. Before the Empress could react, her body had soared into the sky and flew directly to the roof of the main hall next to her. Right now, the surroundings of the main hall could be said to be quite lively. All kinds of shouts, roars, commands, and cries could be heard incessantly. Groups of people were running around like ants on a hot pan. Among them, a middle-aged man in a pure white silk imperial robe stood out among the group of modern guards and guests. Although he looked like an actor who had just left the set and forgot to change his clothes, this middle-aged man was actually the current Heavenly Emperor Wu De, who was also Xiao Hatian Ya's husband. However, although he was the emperor of a country, at this time, the Heavenly Emperor was full of impatience. He kept complaining to the chief guard standing beside him. "Haven't you brought the Empress out yet? What the hell are you doing?" I'm sorry, Heavenly Emperor, we have sent the nearest guard to Plum Blossom, and we should be able to rescue the Empress soon." After feeling the dissatisfaction of the country's #1 mascot next to him, the seemingly old guard couldn't help but take out a handkerchief to wipe the sweat on his forehead. Obviously, he was also very anxious. What is this? What the hell is going on? The princess coming-of-age ceremony was about to start, but an emergency alarm suddenly sounded at the plum blossom where the empress was. This sudden situation really made many people feel like they were going bald. However, just as the head of the guards continued to arrange for the guards to charge over there, ready to save Her Highness even if all of them were to die, two figures suddenly appeared on the roof of the main hall not far away. At this time, a sharp-eyed guard saw the situation above the main hall first, so he quickly shouted, "Look! Look at the roof of the main hall! Isn't that the Empress?" As soon as the words came out, everyone was shocked. They quickly looked up and saw that there were indeed two figures on top of the two-story main hall. One of them was pulling the other to the center like a dog. The woman being pulled was naturally the Empress that everyone was very familiar with, and the other person pulling her to the center of the roof was a young man in a flashy white suit. What's going on? Kidnapping? Kidnapping? Who is that young man? Just as the people below were completely confused about what was going on, but because the Empress was in the hands of the criminal, Heavenly Emperor Wuda couldn't help but shout, "The person up there, hurry up and let go of the Empress. Otherwise, you will die without a burial place." Usually, Heavenly Emperor Wuda was a middle-aged man who looked very spineless and didn't have anything to do with the word emperor at all. If he was thrown into a company, it would be easy for people to mistake him for an old social worker who worked from 9 to 5. However, no matter how weak and spineless a man was, when he saw his wife being held hostage by evil people, he couldn't help but yell out. Although Long Do didn't know what to say when he heard this yell. "Did you hear that? Your husband said that if I don't let go of you, I will die without a burial place." Raito smiled when he heard that. He reached out and patted Konoha's face, who was gradually recovering her consciousness, to help her wake up faster. After waking up, the Empress realized that she was actually on the roof of the main hall. And there were at least a few hundred guards nearby. A group of people stared at the spectacular scene of their Empress being held hostage by Raito. When she realized how embarrassing she was now and how dangerous the situation was, the calm expression on Konoha's face finally loosened. There was no doubt that Raito was now ready to go all out. Just as he had said at the beginning, killing one was enough for him, killing two would earn him a profit, and the more he killed, the more he would earn. In that case, wouldn't he be free to go all out? So now Raito didn't mind killing this Empress at all. In this Kokyo, in front of the Heavenly Emperor and a group of lackeys, he would twist this woman's head off on the spot. Mad dog, for Raito Kiri, the only word Konoha could think of to describe him was mad dog. As long as you provoked him, you would be greeted with 10 times or 100 times the passionate return without caring about the consequences. He was simply not a normal person. Konoha naturally didn't want to die. She still had many ambitions that she hadn't completed. How could she be dragged down by this mad dog? Wouldn't that be too stupid? So she couldn't help but persuade, "Raito-kun, don't be impulsive, I think we need to talk." "There's a need to talk. Alright, but you have to make that guy back off first. Otherwise, I might accidentally break your neck." Ryu-do had already placed his hand on the back of Kawata's neck. At the same time, he looked at the side of the roof not far away, looking at Saichu Rudo who was glaring at them. In fact, after dodging the flash bomb attack, although Saichu wanted to go back to protect his master, he was still one step behind Raito. He could only watch Konoha being dragged to the roof. Seeing his master being held hostage by such a stinking brat, entering Dao was naturally infuriated, to the point where his anger was at a level of 3,000 feet. However, no matter how angry he wasn't stupid enough to yell at someone like the Emperor. If he forced the dragon fighter into a corner and killed Owada Marzada in front of everyone, everything would be over. With Raito's current strength, if he wanted to kill Konoha, no one would be able to stop him. Even if a sniper shot him in the head, he would still be able to take the person he was holding with him before his head was blown off. So when Konoha fell into Raito's hands, the situation had been completely reversed. The option of safely rescuing the hostage from Raito's hands did not exist from the beginning. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, it would not be possible. Konoha naturally understood this, so she quickly nodded to Saichu, and Saichu also tactfully took a few steps back, and asked the guards who were about to climb to the roof to participate in the rescue to get as far away as possible. Now if she wanted to save her life, what she needed was not strength, but wisdom and eloquence. And wisdom and eloquence happened to be the things this queen was best at, so now she planned to seize the last chance of survival with her own ability. No matter what, she had to persuade Raito not to kill her. No matter how many promises he made, he would not refuse. After all, he only had one life. Without his life, everything would be meaningless. At this time, the queen advised again, Raito-kun, in fact, you are still young, there is no need to go to such a dead end. Give me a chance, and I will give you a chance. You are really thick-skinned, you are the one who forced us into this dead end. If you didn't plan to frame me, there wouldn't be so much trouble, right? Why are you saying these words? Raito's face showed a sarcastic expression, but Konoha continued to say without care, then I will ask, what do you want to let me go? I can satisfy all your conditions. Satisfy all my conditions. Actually, I just want to ask you a few questions, but you only have 5 seconds to answer. If you exceed it, your head will fall to the ground. How about that? Just like when Raito was threatened by Eheim in the unrestrained tower, this time, it was his turn to propose this pleasant 5-second question and answer. But compared to Eheim's punishment of breaking a finger if you exceed it, Raito was obviously more ruthless, and his head fell to the ground. I'll just say it. Hearing that the 3 was about to become 2, and the 2 was about to become 1, Kawata Seiji gritted her teeth and quickly replied, next, I'm going to use your matter as a fuse. I'm going to implement a big project called Extreme Purge Plan. Before Kawata Seiji's voice fell, Raito S1 had just fallen. This made her feel cold sweat as if her neck would fly to the sky at any time. What? Extreme Purge Plan? Raito finally stopped counting after hearing her words and continued to ask, what do you mean? Are you going to put all the extreme doors in prison? Yes, it's that simple. Since she had already said it, Kawata Seiji told Raito the plan she was going to do. In any case, things had already come to this point. There was no way Long Do could walk out of here alive. So be it. What could a dead man do if he heard it? According to Kawata Seiji's explanation, they were going to unite various departments and carry out a wave of suppression of the entire country's extreme doors in the name of Rulon Group leader Raito Kirie's series of evil deeds in the Kokyo. In fact, this situation was not unimaginable to Raito, but he always felt puzzled. What benefits would this bring to Kawata Seiji? Even if all the extreme doors in the country were put in prison, what could they do? So Raito continued to ask, hey, you won't say that you want to maintain law and order for the country, so you want to purge us extreme doors, right? What benefits would this bring to you? Why not? Woo woo woo. Just when Kawata Seiji was about to calmly say why not, Raito suddenly grabbed her neck, and she couldn't breathe at all. The queen was like a fish out of water. She opened her mouth and desperately wanted to breathe, but she couldn't do it at all. It's so hard. So uncomfortable. For the pampered Kawata Seiji, it was the first time she was interrogated like this in her life. For a moment, she could only wave her hand and beg for mercy, begging Raito to stop. A few seconds later, Raito loosened his grip and sneered, do you think I'm a fool? Your real identity is a spy serving American. Why would you worry about law and order in this country? Don't say it. Just now, she was almost suffocated by Raito's grip, and now he suddenly exposed her real identity. Kawata Seiji's mentality couldn't help but collapse. Even if she was an experienced fox spirit, under this double blow of physical and mental strength, she would more or less collapse, not to mention that her life was always in the hands of others. And Raito continued to question, what do you mean by don't say it? Aren't you afraid of others saying it? Why? Why do you want to capture all the extreme doors in Japan this time? Could it be that the emperor can't satisfy your needs in that aspect, so you, as the queen, want more men to serve you in turn? Bastard. Preposterous. What nonsense are you talking about? Her mentality was already collapsing, and after being seriously insulted by Raito, Kawata Seiji finally couldn't help but curse. You stinky extreme doors. Despicable things. You're as hopeless as this garbage country. When I become the Prime Minister, I will enact a law to hang all of you. Under extreme mental pressure, Kawata Seiji finally spilled the beans and told the most important part of her plan. Become the Prime Minister. Govern. Although Kawata Seiji quickly covered her mouth, Raito had already understood the purpose of the extreme door cleansing plan from her words. So that's what this girl is thinking. She doesn't want to be a canary. Originally, Raito didn't understand why the queen would try her best to frame him and eliminate all the extreme doors in Japan. Now he understood that this girl was trying to increase her performance. As the queen, she was supposed to be trapped in the cage of the Kokyo for the rest of her life. If she said something like becoming the Prime Minister, it would only make people laugh. You know, in the history of this country, there has never been a precedent of the queen being in power. After all, the royal family was just a mascot. People would at most give face to the royal family, but they would not listen to the royal family's command. It was like people would go to the zoo to feed chimpanzees, but they would not listen to the chimpanzees. But Kawata Seiji was different from the previous queens. In addition to her biological father, she also had a godfather named Uncle Sam, and she was a very ambitious woman. With the support of her godfather, if Kawata Seiji could really promote the extreme door cleansing plan by herself and fully implement it, she could indeed gather a lot of popularity. Although extreme door was a very useful chamber pot for politicians, it was a very troublesome factor in the hearts of the people. Many people wanted all the extreme doors to die. Imagine, the queen was angry because her brother was killed by the leader of the extreme door, and she wanted to use all means to arrest all the extreme doors in the country. What a touching story this was. Once this matter really happened, there was no doubt that Kawata Seiji would become the most popular queen in history, and she would become a real existence admired by the people. When the time came, she would announce her divorce with the emperor and walk into the political arena with her own identity. With the support of her godfather and her own ability, she might really be able to become the prime minister. Unfortunately, although this woman's plan was very good, the only thing she shouldn't have done was to use Raito, the hedgehog, as a stepping stone. At this time, Kawata Seiji, who realized her slip of the tongue, broke down and asked, You know what you want to know, can you talk about letting me go? I can arrange for you to go abroad, I promise you won't. Crack. But just as the Empress was about to fight for one last time in exasperation, she realized that her line of sight had suddenly tilted 90 degrees. At the same time, she heard the crisp sound of a neck breaking. Chapter 230. Even in her dreams, she would never have thought that she would die like this. I, the Empress, was eating hot pot and singing in my own palace. I was happily preparing to ambush someone, but in the end, my neck was broken in front of everyone. It was simply unimaginable that such a strange thing could happen in this world. Plop. As Ryudo casually tossed her forward, Kawata's body rolled down the slope of the roof of the main hall, like a ball that was kicked out. At this moment, Saito Ryudo, who was not far away, went crazy. Emperor Utoku and the Kokyo guards who were watching all of this went crazy as well. The Empress was killed in front of so many people in her own home. This was such a humiliating thing. It was like shitting on the head of the royal family. Battle of the Tongsheng Dragons. With a deafening roar, Access Dao charged over like an enraged beast. Kill. Kill him. Kill him. Kill him. Heavenly Emperor Wude was also crazily shaking the chief guard's collar, asking him to kill that bastard at all costs. It had to be said that after killing Cohesion, Long Do's life had come to an end. Even with his current strength, it was impossible for him to escape in front of Ryudo and the hundreds of armed guards. Most importantly, he did not plan to escape. Therefore, the moment Raito rushed over, Raito did not hesitate to turn around and hug his body. At the same time, The 3 grenades with the safety pin pulled also made a sizzling sound. This guy is crazy. He dares. Seeing Raito hugging him and pulling the grenades, Ryudo's face turned ashen. In an instant, the martial Dao master desperately tried to break free. However, Raito's strength was so strong that Ryudo had no way to break free. Hiss. Hiss. Boom. Accompanied by an earth-shattering explosion, the roof of the main hall of the Kokyo exploded with a loud bang. The huge explosion sent the surrounding guards who had climbed up to the roof flying. The structure of the palace was not very stable to begin with, so the entire palace collapsed along with the explosion. The palace exploded, the empress was dead, everything was over. What happened after that, Raito did not know. However, even if he used his butt to think, he could imagine Emperor Utoku's face. As for Raito, he only knew that in his resume, other than being chopped by a sword, ejected by a blanket, hit by a car, and being hit by a rocket, he also had the glorious addition of a grenade. He was one step closer to 100 ways to die. Detected that the host is on the verge of death. Initiating emergency rescue plan by spending 1 million yen to erase the fact of death. Beep, beep, erase successful. Long Do opened his eyes and realized that he was standing in front of the entrance of the main hall that was still intact. A huge palm tree stood in the front yard of the main palace. Some guests were chatting happily under the tree. Not far away, people were coming and going in the pine room of the main palace. Some staff members were installing the equipment that would be used during the visit later. Compared to the super chaotic scene before Raito opened his eyes, the current Kokyo had returned to its previous lively state. It was ready to welcome the celebration ceremony at any time. So that's how it is. The backtracking point this time was before I entered the main palace and met Father John. Raito looked at the surrounding environment and looked at his watch. He confirmed that it was around 10:30. There was still half an hour before the princess's coming-of-age ceremony. According to the time, Father John should be preparing to walk out of the pine room and walk towards Raito. He would soon sacrifice himself for justice. If Raito continued to walk towards the main palace, then no matter what he did, there was a high chance that he would be tricked by Kobayashi. Of course, if Raito chose to run away now, Kobayashi wouldn't be able to trick him. But even so, it didn't count as breaking the Extreme Purge Plan. The evil deeds of the leader of the Extreme Purge Plan, Raito Kiri, were one of the fuses of the Extreme Purge Plan, but it wasn't the only fuse. Even if Raito ran away now, Kobayashi could immediately find another Extreme Purge member to act as the fuse. This wasn't just Raito's problem alone. It was the problem of all the Extreme Purge members in the country. Therefore, what Raito needed to thwart was the entire Extreme Purge Plan. It wasn't as simple as just running away. Thinking of this, Raito immediately turned around and ran towards a secluded corner not far from the main palace. At the same time, he took out his mobile phone and dialed the colored glaze's number. Beep beep. Beep beep. Did something happen? A second later, the colored glaze on the other side of the phone quickly picked up and asked anxiously. It was obvious that she had been paying attention to Raito's situation. Don't talk first, listen to me first. There are a series of troublesome things that will happen soon. Suddenly, Raito, who was hiding in the corner, told the colored glaze everything he knew through the phone in his hand. From Father John's invitation to Between the Plums, to the killing device in his collar, to the Empress plan to use it to kill Long Do and launch the extreme cleansing plan as political capital for her to ascend the throne. In Raito's description, half of the information was what he heard while hiding in a corner, and the other half was his conjecture. Is this really the case? After hearing Raito's words, the colored glaze couldn't help but frown. After all, it was too much of a coincidence that he was able to eavesdrop on such important information. But Raito said firmly, this is absolutely true. They definitely didn't discover my existence, and I also checked Father John's clothes. There is indeed a killing device inside. Of course, this was 100% true. After all, Raito had personally experienced it not long ago. It was just that he couldn't tell the truth to the colored glaze. He could only describe it with half-truths. Although the colored glaze still felt that something was wrong, since Raito said so, she could only choose to believe it. Then at this moment, the question came. In this case, how should they reverse the situation? Running away was definitely the worst way because there was no way to solve the extreme purge plan and Konoha Tenya's conspiracy. As long as Raito left, the officials could even say that he fled for fear of punishment, and he would still be thrown into jail. So Raito couldn't leave. He had to stay here and completely destroy this plan. Otherwise, there would only be endless trouble. Therefore, on the other side of the phone, the colored glaze pondered while using her slender thumb and index finger to twirl a handful of soft hair that hung down to her side. She rubbed it as if she was making a fireball. Kanzaki Colored Glaze's exclusive skill Queen's Finger. Activate. Snap. After a few seconds, with a snap of her fingers, the colored glaze opened her eyes and immediately said to Raito, "Didn't you say that Kojima Rinka is nearby and can help you?" "That's true, but what do we need her to do? Since she is the section chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, it shouldn't be a problem for her to temporarily help two people hide in the Kokyo." "Two people? One is me, the other is Father John, also known as Kojima Ying. He is a big trump card for us to defeat the extreme purge plan and kill Kojima YA." Speaking of this, the colored glaze's mouth couldn't help but raise an excited smile. For the colored glaze, the most difficult part of this operation was Raito's special identity. As a leader of the extreme purge, such an identity had no credibility and persuasiveness. No matter how he explained, he couldn't defend himself. This was also the reason why Kojima YA found him. Therefore, no matter what happened in between the plums, even if it was only Father John who chose to commit suicide, Kojima YA could blame her brother's death on Raito. After all, Raito was the leader of the largest extreme purge in Yoto. This identity was destined to be the first thing that people would find when there was an incident around him. So no matter what happened, it was absolutely meaningless for Raito to clarify himself. He needed someone with credibility to speak for him, to help expose Kojima YA's true identity. And this person with credibility was the president of the Great Beauty Association, Kojima Ying. If the Empress's brother personally stood out to testify, plus the Metropolitan Police Department's Search Department Chief Toshima Linhua, then this credibility was no joke. It was enough to completely throw Kojima YA, the Empress, into the abyss. From a normal point of view, it was hard to imagine that Kojima Ying would voluntarily stand out to testify against his own sister. However, if this sister of his had installed a killing device in his collar and was prepared to drag him out as a living sacrifice, then the situation would be different. This was betrayal, and it was the kind of betrayal that stabbed a knife in the back. It was enough to send chills down one's spine, turning even the strongest love into a ruthless betrayal. Colored Glaze could imagine, when Kojima Ying knew that his sister wanted to kill him, how angry he would feel. This kind of anger was enough to drive humans to make an unexpected and fierce counterattack. So now, what Raito needed to do was to let the incident of Kojima Ying's death happen and think of a way to save him. Then ask Chief Toshima to help hide Raito and Kojima Ying, and wait until not long after the Empress holds a press conference to announce the start of the Extreme Purge plan, then let Kojima Ying appear to testify. If this combination of moves went smoothly, not only would the so-called Extreme Purge plan be completely ruined, but it would also consign Empress Wu De and Kojima YA to eternal damnation, with no possibility of ever making a comeback. Of course, this counterattack plan sounded simple, but the process would definitely encounter a lot of trouble, but this was the problem Raito had to overcome. Very good. Kojima YA, wash your neck and wait. Not only will I destroy your reputation, but I will also make you die even more miserably than the last time, even more ugly. After quickly discussing some details with Colored Glaze and hanging up the phone, Raito turned his head to look at among the flowers not far away. A fierce killing intent flashed in his eyes. Then, Raito ran towards among the flowers not far away, the important person who was indispensable in this counterattack plan. The Search Department Chief Toshima Linhua was there. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.